Okay, so it is actually going, but it's not showing me, which is, yeah, I love this thing. Let us stay to pieces! Okay. If anybody's here. I don't really know. Maps all social networks out. And hopefully we get some people that comes and joins us. Pete. Okay, not enough of basically staring at this lovely screen. I really wanted to talk to you guys, but I can't because I'm not sure if things are working, so hopefully you pop in. I have seen 2 people ask for 2 of the Seduce Me 2. That's all I already saw. I dropped down some bottles of water, so if I get thirsty, I have something to drink from a dry throat. I have beaten these all, but we are going to play this, but I have not read them. I have not read them, and hopefully I get joined by you guys. So, anyway, first person that asked me was from Matt, so I'm going to go do his story. Just because it's fun.
Hold on there.
And like always,
I need to ask you
I hope you guys don't mind, but I'm gonna skip her. Yes.
Okay, you did.
Blah blah blah. Yep, I know. Now I'm good.
Oh.
Holy shit, we went too fast. Haha.
Do not call me Die.
Alright, we reverse to where we need to be, so here we
I do
go.
hope you like the story.
This has gone on for long enough. I will not let them trap me in a corner like this. Azira! You're still here. Why have you not left like the others?
What do you want?
I don't know. Did you honor
I said, do you honor our marriage?
I do honor it.
Then you still stand by our bond?
Why are you asking me these questions?
Because I need your energy.
What? What's you?
I'm giving you your physical form back. You should be thankful.
What are you?
Fuck! I could only stare at what was in front of me. I could hardly believe it was real, but there it was, right before my eyes. How had my life even gotten to this point? As I gripped the pen in my hand, I let my mind settle into the situation. My fingers gently slid over the pen surface, nervous and softly shaking. This was happening.
Hey, is everything okay?
I glanced up to see Matthew, looking at me with worry. I could only shake my head and smile, before finally signing my name on the paper in front of me. Yep, or keep your eyes, Mika. Looking at my own name made me somewhat giddy, especially since it was next to Matthew's. So what do you think? Matthew looked over and gently rotated the paper on the table to look at what I had written.
Thank you for coming to our wedding.
Oh, God. No. What's wrong?
Nothing. It's just really cool to see our names together.
I felt a blush run across my cheeks. Was he thinking the same thing I was? Looking at our names together made me feel warm and fuzzy on the inside. Looking at Matthew, he was grinning ear to ear, which made me do the same. His smile was practically infectious.
Anyways, we are very happy you could all attend. It means so much to us that you support our step forward, and we hope you enjoy the reception. That sounds good, right?
Yeah, that sounds good. Wedding preparations were nothing like I expected. I had organized parties before, but my own wedding had become a new foreign adventure for me to figure out with Matthew. Invitation budgets, the dresses, the ceremony venues, the reception hall, it was all crazy. Still, I was glad to know that I was able to do this, to be with Matthew. He seemed as excited about this as I was. There was something missing, however. Hey, Matthew.
Huh? What is it?
Do you think your mom would approve of this? The curiosity of the idea had been eating at me ever since he proposed to me. I knew he wasn't a fan of his father, but his mother was a different story. According to him, she had always been supportive of him, right up until he left. Matthew rubbed his head, staring at the table in thought.
Well, I don't know. I think she'd be surprised I'm marrying a human. But I think she'd be okay with it in the end. She is my mother, after all.
Matthew only smiled and shrugged. I knew it was a bit out of left field to ask, but I was curious. I wished his mother could be able to attend the wedding, but I knew that would never be an option. Now, before I continue on, guys, with the story, there will be some difficult words where I will not get them at all. Please understand that I can't get them. I'm sorry. They just haven't been words that I have seen before in a very long time. I'm not occasionally a huge reader, so please bear with me. I'm gonna do my best that I can. But if you do have a problem with it, well, there is another person that's probably doing the same thing with a better voice and word pronunciation to your satisfaction. Huh? My thoughts instantly derailed as I caught a ghostly whisper that seemed to reverberate in the air. I couldn't pin down the location, but I knew that I had heard something.
Huh? What is it?
You didn't hear that?
What?
I looked at Matthew in surprise. He didn't hear the whisper. He had spoken his true name. I shook my head and rubbed my temples. Maybe I was just imagining things. Spooky! There it was again! I stood up from my seat and looked around, trying to figure out where the voice was coming from. Who's there?
Whoa! Whoa! What's wrong?
I looked at Matthew. How could he not hear it? I wasn't crazy. Well, I'm gonna say someone's saying your name. Matthew raised an eyebrow, unsure of what I meant. Why didn't he get it? What was so hard to understand? I know I'm not making sense, but someone keeps saying your real name.
My real name?
Yeah, she keeps saying it. And help me. Matthew slowly rose from his seat, looking down at the table in confusion and worry. I could tell he believed me, but wasn't sure how to respond. Are you sure you couldn't hear it?
I'm sure.
Matthew looked up at me and walked around the table to stand next to me, and I turned my body to face him. He looked into my eyes and gently brought his hands to my cheek.
Does she sound like anyone we know?
No. I stared at Matthew, continued to look into my eyes. What was he looking for? Eventually, Matthew leaned in and placed a soft kiss on my forehead. What?
I'll look into it, okay? For right now, don't worry about it and ignore it. It might be an illusion or something. This place is so full of magic, so it could be that.
I could tell Matthew was worried. He wasn't making sense. However, I knew that we had a lot on our minds, so this was something that needed to wait. Maybe he just wanted me to not worry. For some reason at the wait, I saw an R. I don't know why I saw an R, but I saw an R. Still, I couldn't help but be worried about it. Matthew gently released me and gave me one of his goofy smiles.
Alright, well, I think that's enough work for today. Let's save the rest for tomorrow, okay?
I nodded. Today had been pretty stressful, so rest would definitely be good. Matthew led me back up to our room and got ready for bed. I, however, watched as Matthew absently ruffled his hair. Despite his kid-like demeanor, he was still a man, and he was the one I was going to marry. What was even better about our love was that we both loved every part of each other. I couldn't stop gushing over his eyes, his fluffy hair, his kisses. He drove me crazy, as he made me smile every single day I spent with him. It didn't help that he was also sexy underneath that baggy clothes he wore. No one was privileged enough to see him bare, and I was the lucky woman given that permission. Woo! A simple ruffle of his hair was enough to catch my attention. And I stared at him. I really loved him. A small fire burned in my core, letting me know of my sexual attraction to him. But I wasn't sure whether or not to go with my gut or just sleep. Tease him. Looking up and down his body, I really couldn't help but let my, oh God almighty, libido take control. I let out a soft moan, loud enough for Matthew to hear. He froze, turning to look at me. Okay, what the fuck? Either my eyes are very tired because I had a very early shift, and the words are either not words. Excuse me, I'll take that back. Not words. Letters are appearing and then frickin' disappearing on me. So let's do that sentence again, shall we? He froze, turning to look at me with a blush across his face.
Huh?
Matthew? I was nervous, but I decided to seize him. I would have to go all the way. I slowly began to strip off my clothes, revealing my underwear and bra. Matthew's eyes darkened into a lustful gaze as I gently ran my fingers over my stomach and between my breasts. We did a lot of work today, but I don't want to sleep just yet. I gently leaned forward and climbed onto the bed, on my hands and knees, letting him enjoy the sight of my cleavage. Yep, there it is, all hanging out for you. Matthew turned to watch me slowly, not taking his eyes away from me as I crawled forward to his side of the bed. I licked my lips happily to know that my teasing was working. I finally stopped, moving forward and got up on my knees, leaning back a bit and stretching my arms behind my head. Why not? Why not make the night a bit better with me? I almost couldn't recognize my own voice. However, I went along with it. He wasn't the only one in the relationship that could set a mood, though he was an incubus. As Matthew stared, I felt a soft heat enveloped my core and rushed through my body. Another moan came out of my mouth. I looked into Matthew's eyes, seeing them glow, a loving but lust-filled gold. It slowly faded as the enthrallment he cast on me ran through my body, making me hotter. Oh, hello. Oh, dear. Matthew slowly began to strip off his jacket and shirt, letting me enjoy the show before he licked his lips. He knew exactly how to respond to my teasing, and despite it not being fair, he used his inhuman charms to make my mind melt at the sight of him. As he pulled his shirt off of his body, he held it out to the side, letting me get a good look at his chest. I felt myself lick my own lips at the sights.
Then we make it better.
Oh dear. That was all he needed to say before coming over to me and crawling over my body, capturing my lips with his in a heated kiss. His arms wrapped around my waist as his other hand gently slid down behind my back and gingerly held my rear. I let my legs move out from underneath me so that he could kneel between them, gently grinding my knee against his. He smirked against my lips as he gave a playful, slow grind with his hips against my core. My mind went crazy at his teasing foreplay. You bully. He pulled me against his body, squeezing me with his arms around my waist. Before deepening the kiss between us, I let a moan escape my throat and became lost in his mouth as he claimed my lips for himself. I loved feeling him touch me and hold me to him. He was the man I loved, and I wanted to give him everything as he gave me just as much and more. Our sex became just another way to express our desire for each other. Soon enough, we were both panting and moaning hotly as we made deep and passionate love. Our clothes were strewn around the room, but our focus was in each other's eyes. His moans echoed mine as he kissed and nippled over my neck and shoulders. However, he'd always come back to stare into my eyes and kiss me deeply as he made love to me, as I made love to him. I loved him and wanted to be held by him and be full of him forever. My heart belonged to him, and he was a dream come true for me. To feel his love for me was a blissful treasure I would cherish and experience for the rest of my life. He always knew how to find my sweetest spots and knew the ways to make me buck and scream his name. We rose higher in our pleasure and ecstasy until both ran over our limits and ever so gently floated back into the loving feeling of our embrace. Matthew could only pant and hold me in his arms, sweetly petting my hair and kissing over my forehead.
I love you so much.
I love you too. My heart fluttered at the sound of his voice. He was my everything, and to feel him in my arms made me happy beyond compare. I happily embraced the darkness of sleep as Matthew continued to hold me in his arms. The darkness was meant to be peaceful. Sleep was meant to be relaxing. However, my mind began to wander to what had happened earlier that evening, Hearing that voice made me worried. Something was off. Something was going on, and I was the only one who could sense it. Why, though? I let the darkness seep into my mind a little longer, unsure of what to think of it. That sound was a bit alarming. What the? I opened my eyes and found myself no longer in my bed, but on a stone-cold floor, staring at a high marble ceiling. Despite feeling foreign textures beneath my skin, I vaguely knew where I was. I was in the main hall of the Demon Lord's castle. I remember the sight from the vision of the boys gave me when Diana first appeared. Why was I here, though? Where? My instincts forced me to turn to the sound, and I saw someone I did not expect. Diana? Held in the air was Diana, hanging from the four long lines of chains that were attached to her wrists, ankles. She was spread out like a star, and the chains were pulling her body in different directions, seemingly ready to rip her in half. My mind couldn't fathom why she was in this illusion, if this was one. She looked so different, but I could tell it was her. Why was she in chains, though?
Release me.
Matthew's voice reverberated with a cold demonic renaissance, and it drew my eyes towards him in shock. There he was, sitting on the throne, practically lounging on it. He was still in his human form, but his eyes were glowing an unnatural gold color. What was even more odd was that he was smirking at Diana. I had never seen his smirk like that, like he was enjoying seeing someone's pain.
I'll kill you once I'm born in this game. It's just so much fun to watch.
You think this is funny, brat?
Matthew glared at the chains, pulled harder on Diana's limbs. I flinched from the sound of her body, stretching, almost hearing the sound of bones cracking. Diana, however, sneered at Matthew in reply.
You really think calling me a brat is going to help?
That's what you are. A brat who abuses his toys until they break.
I only could stare at the two, completely confused by what I was witnessing. I tried to speak out, but suddenly my voice disappeared before any sound could be formed in my throat. Gripping my neck, I looked down, trying to figure out why I couldn't speak. There was some sort of voice. There was some sort of vice. Oh my god, voice. There was some sort of vice pressed through my vocal cords, not allowing me to mutter even a single sound. Its weight made me almost choke. However, I looked back up at Matthew, gave a sickly evil chuckle.
That's right. I like to play with my toys until they're of no use to me. That's how toys work.
Wow. He's kinda like demonic, really bad hardcore here. Matthew stood up slowly from the throne, and his lips curled into a devilish smile as his tongue ran along his upper lip.
And when I'm done with them, I destroy them.
What of the human? Is she just another toy?
I looked at Diana, seeing her move her head to look at me, before turning back to Matthew in realization. I was physically there. I wasn't just watching the event. I was part of it. Matthew looked back at me, and his face shifted to an instant smile. My heart desperately clung to the possibility that he wasn't as evil as he was presenting himself to be. His smile pulled at my heartstrings, giving me hope that he was just playing some sick joke.
She's not just a toy.
My heart dropped in my chest. Matthew tilted his head cutely, giving me a disgusting feeling of adoration and fear from the sight. Never had I imagined feeling like this while looking at the one I love, yet here I was.
She's my favorite toy. I can't break the toy that I had the most fun with, especially when that toy gives me so much energy.
Like a predator, Matthew began to walk towards me, passing underneath Diana's hanging form. I couldn't move as he knelt down and cupped his hand around my chin.
Keep on with me forever and ever.
Fear sneered my nerves. I did not want to be near this man. This wasn't Matthew. It couldn't be. There was no way. As he stood up, I felt tears run down my face. If this was a nightmare, I wanted to wake up. Please! Matthew's hand pointed at the throne. Matthew's hands pointed at the throne and glided. Sorry guys, I know I paused. There's a reason why I paused. It is glided. It is. Okay, and we rewind, and we go. Matthew's hands pointed at the throne and glided through the air back to me. The sound of chains echoed through the room, forcing me to follow it and see a chain flying at me. I tried to scream as it leaped towards my throat. From thin air, a shackle collar formed around my neck, connecting to the chain as it reached me, and I was pulled forward roughly through the air before landing beside the throne with a painful thud.
No!
Diana screamed as a large cage suddenly formed around my body, making me its prisoner. I scrambled to my knees and gripping the bars surrounding me, now frightened beyond compare. Matthew let out a terrifying laugh, sending more waves of fright through my body. This wasn't happening.
This world is mine. No one can stand in my way. Not James, not the Demon Lord, and not you, Diana.
Smirking wildly, Matthew looked at Diana, raising his arms across his body.
And I've grown tired of you.
Before Matthew could move, my fear and anger quickly bubbled in my chest. One word pushing past the blockage in my throat. Stop! As my voice ripped through the air, everything went black. My body, however, sat up in the bed. My body, however, sat up in bed in shock from what I had seen. My scream reverberated through the room as I let it sink in that I was awake and all of that had just been a nightmare. Despite it all feeling real, I was no longer in a cage. I wasn't in a room with Diana being ripped apart. I wasn't.
What?
I shot my head to the side to see Matthew in bed with me, sitting up beside me and rubbing his head. A heavy tiredness weighed down the eyelids over his frightened eyes, but my mind suddenly began to seize in fear just from looking at him. My mind shouted that it had just been a nightmare, but my body couldn't help but remember what Matthew had done to me in the dream. It may have been fake, but I couldn't stop the fright from washing over my nerves. Tears formed in my eyes as I stared at Matthew. I wanted to know that everything was fine, that I really was more than just a toy for him, but my voice wouldn't let me speak without bawling. Matthew quickly rubbed his eyes and stared at me, his concern obviously deepening at seeing me in tears. He slowly raised his hands to embrace me, but I flinched away, causing him to freeze in place.
Whoa, it's okay. It's alright. It's just me.
Matthew's voice tried to warm over my fear, but my feelings were still conflicted. Despite my brain knowing better, he continued to stare at me, waiting for me to relax. I could only meet his gaze, worriedly with both fear and sadness.
Hey, I'm gonna hug you, okay? That's all.
My heart wanted to believe him. I had to. He couldn't be as sadistic as my nightmare had depicted him. I nodded, and Matthew slowly began to wrap his arms around me, hugging me to his chest. Sorry, guys. I needed to get a drink, and I am sipping a little bit besides. So any pauses you do hear are because I need a little bit of water. He's a good girl.
There we go. It's okay.
I began to melt into Matthew's arms, finally feeling the fear disappear from my body. I pressed my face into his shoulders, shaking in remorse as the panic drained away. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Matthew simply rocked me in his arms and nuzzled the side of my head with his. He occasionally planted a kiss over my cheek and shoulders, reminding me of his love and that everything was okay. His breath became a temple for me to follow, letting me relax and feel his love all around me.
Bad dream, huh?
Yeah. Matthew gave me a soft squeeze, snuggling up to me. As I gratefully snuggled back, he would never hurt me. I couldn't let myself be this affected by a nightmare. Hopefully, he wouldn't ask about it.
Hey, whatever the dream was, just know that everything will be alright, okay? It was just a stupid nightmare. Whenever you wake up, I'll be right here beside you, ready to make it go away.
The way he sounded so confident made my heart flutter in my chest. He truly cared for me, and that was something I adored about him. He loved me, and I loved him, in return just as much. I nodded and nuzzled his shoulders, warming into his embrace further. Matthew smiled and kissed the top of my head. As I closed my eyes, he gently laid us back down onto the mattress and helped me shift to his... That doesn't make sense. Matthew smiled and kissed the top of my head. As I closed my eyes, he gently laid us back down onto the mattress and helped me shift to lie against him, making his chest my pillow. Okay, now it made sense. For some reason, I went, "Woo!" Thankfully, the nightmare didn't return that night. I was left with a warm embrace and a peaceful slumber until the morning rose. Even in the days that followed, the nightmare didn't come back. Ugh. Neither did the mysterious voice. My week became peaceful. Final details for the wedding became our only focus. I was nervous for it, and soon the day of the wedding had snuck up on me, and I was in my room staring at myself in my wedding dress. I could hardly believe it. I was getting married. My family and the guests were all at the church, waiting for me to march in, but I was so nervous I hadn't left the mansion yet. It was only a 3-minute drive away, so it wasn't like I was in a terrible rush. Looking at the digital clock in my room, I marked the time. So if you guys are here, I can't really tell the current moment because in game mode, it's really hard to know. Really hard to know. "30 more minutes. I let out a sigh. I had asked my friends to allow me to get ready on my own. So I was alone in the mansion. Yet even while I was alone, the anxiousness of the wedding made me nervous. Why? Was I just that excited? Running a hand over my dress, my fingers traced over the seams, and in traces of the design. Yep, a word that is hard for me just appeared. Gosh damn it. But that's okay. We can just call it traces of the design, and we'll just roll with it. It was indeed my dream wedding dress, down to the last detail. My parents fronted the bill as congratulations, which still made me laugh. Thanks, parents. You're the best. How they had ever come to accept Matthew was a mystery to me, especially when he was incredibly vague about who he was. I blamed his incubus magic. Whoa! Rock out! Before I could wander farther into my nostalgical memories, I heard my phone ring, urging me to quickly answer. Hello?
Hey, Lucky Bride. We have a little bit of problem.
My mind quickly froze. A problem? What could possibly be wrong?
Now you're scaring her, Naomi. I don't mean to. Tell her about the ring.
Huh? The rings? What about the rings?
Well, apparently Matthew forgot to bring them. He knows where they are, but you'll have to bring them with you when you come.
I let out a small sigh. It wasn't a big problem. Thank goodness, it was something that had an easy solution. Oh, okay, that's fine. Where did he put them?
Well, he said he put the rings in his dresser drawer. He said it was so Simon couldn't get them.
Really? I rolled my eyes. Simon wasn't that bad. Besides, he was a doll. Sure, he was a doll that could move and stuff, but he wasn't evil, just a bit mischievous. Alright, I'll bring them over. Meet me at the front of the church and I'll hand them over before the wedding starts.
Got it. See you soon.
I hung up and smiled. At least the issue wasn't something outrageous that would have been mortifying. Quickly, I rushed over to the dresser and opened the drawer, expecting to see the ring box in plain sight. What the? When I looked inside, I found nothing except clothes. I opened each drawer of the dresser, checking each nook and cranny, while moving clothes around to find the box. Nothing. Sorry, bed. I know I like you, but come on. I looked up and glanced around the bedroom, unsure of why Simon was laughing. He was really wanting to play a game right now. Damn it, Simon! I hiked up my dress and began to search the halls of the mansion, determined to find Simon. He had to have the rings, and I was in no mood to play around. Simon, give me those rings! He couldn't have gone far. I decided to check this floor before going downstairs. Let's go to the bathroom. I stepped into the bathroom, looking around and hoping to find the fur ball somewhere with the ring box. Alas, he didn't seem to be anywhere in sight. What the hell? I grumbled to myself before turning to leave. However, my eyes locked onto the bathroom mirror, seeing something that made my heart freeze up. Around my neck was a large tattoo-like mark, resembling a blue chain. It was almost glowing over my skin, and the nightmare suddenly rose into my thoughts, reminding me of the fear I had felt. Staring at it, my body began to tremble, as the mark seemed to snake around my neck, like a moving shadow. For a moment, I thought the mark would tighten against my neck, from simply watching it circle over my skin. I brought my hands to my throat, trying to cover it. I didn't want to see it. It had to have been an illusion, right? I was imagining it. I hesitantly removed my hands from my neck and sighed in relief to no longer see the chain mark. I was freaking out over nothing. I rubbed my eyes gently, relieved. Jeez, I was getting worked up over. However, I looked back up at the mirror around my neck. It was a blue collar. I reached to my neck and gasped as a physical felt the collar around my neck. We need to get this thing off. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be happening! I wrapped my fingers around the collar and began to pull at it, trying to rip it apart and get it off my neck. I stretched slightly in my hands, but it remained fastened around my neck. I hastily ran my fingers around it, trying to find a latch or closure. When my fingers came up with nothing, I began to panic even more. How could there not be a latch? I needed to get it off of me. I pulled at it again, practically choking myself in my efforts to remove it. The collar once again stretched in the direction of my pulling hands, but would not rip open. Get off! I nearly screamed, clawing at the collar and yanking it in different directions. Why was it on my neck? Why wouldn't it come off? At that moment, a word came up in my mind. I wasn't sure how it got there, or why I thought of the word, but it appeared in my thoughts, as if it was exactly what I was thinking about. My fingers began to tingle slightly as it resonated in my mind. As I opened my mouth and let it fly from my tongue, I felt my body slightly warm in reply. Salvio! The collar somehow responding to what I had said, began to quiver around my neck, before fading into black mist and disappearing into the air. I instinctively sighed in relief. It was off. Thank God! I rubbed my neck, gratefully feeling only my skin, and slightly appreciating the sensation of my fingers running over my bare neck.
I knew it! That girl has demon magic.
What the?
Fuck it, and let's take her!
The demon will be so pleased.
Who? Before I could turn to search for the voices, I felt hands grab hold of my feet, and I looked down and lifted my dress. Perverted demons? What the fuck? 2 pairs of evil-looking hands. Again, they grabbed me at my feet and probably dragging me down to the underworld again. Or demonic world. Whichever you guys want to call it. 2 pairs of evil-looking hands had taken hold of my ankles, reaching through a dark red and purple pentagram. I shrieked, trying to pull my legs away, but I couldn't stop them, as they swiftly pulled me into the ground. I was pulled deeper into the darkness. I was no longer in my room. I was being dragged through a dark void, one that I couldn't escape. I reached out and clawed at the dark, trying to find something to grab onto. I tried to pull my legs away from the hands that were holding them, but couldn't pull free. What was going on? Why was this happening? Someone help me! As if someone had heard my screams, I suddenly felt the hands let go and disappear, leaving me to float in the darkness they left me in. I shut my eyes. Please let this be a dream. Please let this be a dream. I finally felt a surface under my feet, and I collapsed onto it, my body curling in on itself from the experience I had. I didn't dare tear my eyes away from my lap, not ready to get up just yet. The voice I heard, however, made my heart stop.
You. What are you doing here?
I looked up, finally having the courage to take in my surroundings. My heart stopped beating for a moment, sizzling in my chest. I looked up to see 5 figures, strangers, monsters, beings that I didn't recognize. They all looked down at me in surprise, as if I had dropped in at a very bad time. One man looked like an orc from a fantasy game, without the tusks. He had broken horns and very frightening aura around him. As he stared at me, the other's male was lanky in comparison, more human-like, but I could almost feel power emanating from him regardless. One of the women who was staring at me had rabbit ears. Rabbit ears, they twitched on top of her head as she looked at me and gripped her staff. She seemed harmless, yet she had animal ears. The one creature that I couldn't discern the sex of seemed more excited to see me than surprised. What freaked me out about them was that they had wings sticking out from their back, and they were floating? The last woman, however, set off alarm bells in my head as I looked at her. Surprised face, her hair, her eyes. Diana? As she stared, the woman turned her body towards me in recognition to the name I called her. It was her.
What are you doing here?
Diana walked towards me and stared down at me. It was odd. She didn't look like a human, yet I was afraid of her demon form as it towered over me. I was in shock as to what was going on. Ugh. Before Diana could speak further, most likely to repeat herself, a figure quickly stepped up and bowed to her, kneeling beside her.
My lady, please forgive me. I felt something moving between our worlds and assumed the Demon Lord was to blame, so I intercepted his summoning of this human.
You. So I wasn't the only one who felt the change in the air.
Diana stared at the man kneeling beside me as I kept my eyes at her. As she turned her gaze back to me, I gulped silently. What was she going to do with me? This all felt wrong. I was about to be married. I was about to live my happily ever after with a man I loved. Now I was in a place I didn't know, with Diana and a bunch of other creatures I didn't recognize. My instinct was to... Well, let's see. I think I stayed still that time. How about we just scream? Yeah, we'll cry. This wasn't happening. This couldn't have been happening. No way! I felt tears build up in my eyes, and I lowered them to look at the floor in front of me. As my gaze fell, my lungs began to seize hard, forcing me to hiccup in sadness. I couldn't help it. I began to cry profusely. Why was this happening? Why was I here? If this was another nightmare, I wanted to wake up immediately. This wasn't right. I covered my face and cried into my hands, curling over myself as I let sadness run through my entire body. Please, let me wake up. Please. As I felt warmth suddenly spread through my body, I slowly stopped and felt fresh air rush into my lungs. What was happening? I recognized this warmth. I looked up to see Diana kneeling down with a very concerned look on her face, her visible eyes glowing a warm, cold color as she stared at me. Was she enthralling me? I didn't feel aroused like I felt usually whenever I was enthralled, but I felt calm and almost mellow.
Calm down.
Diana's voice seemed almost soothing, like a lullaby. However, I wasn't sleepy. I just felt quiet. The worry I had in my mind was gone. The sadness was gone. Diana must have done something to make sure I wouldn't cry. I didn't know whether to thank her or be afraid.
Now, can you tell me what happened? Take your time and try to remember everything.
Succubus, we have no time for...
Shh! Let her do her thing! The human obviously knows her. She obviously needs her. Why did she call her Diana? Oh.
That must have been the human name she used while she was in the human world. It's mine.
All of you, please!
Silence engulfed the room as Diana looked at the 4 beings behind her. She then turned back to me and held out her hand, urging me to take it.
Can you stand?
I nodded and took her hand, standing up at last. I looked around at the others beings in the room. They all kept their gaze to me, unsure of what I would do or say. Diana, however, led the conversation.
First, can you tell me what happened to you?
I took a breath, recounting everything that happened. I was about to go to the church to be married, and then I was attacked by this darkness. A couple of hands grabbed my legs and pulled me into it, and then I fell here.
The shadows.
Diana turned to one of the beings, the lanky male, and glared.
One of yours couldn't have.
On my honor, it wasn't any of mine. We have nothing to gain from kidnapping a human. Nor do we know who this woman is, anyhow.
My lady, if I may, I clearly remember hearing imp demons in the void along with her. It must have been the Demon Lord's henchmen.
Those devil creatures.
Diana crossed her arms and looked to me again.
Well, dear, it seems that you were to be either a new harem for the demon lord to ravish, or bait for the boys to return to their father's cell. Either way, I doubt you would have lived long had the demon lord gotten his hands on you.
A violent shiver ran up my spine. Was it true? I would have died?
Wait a minute. This girl knows about the Demon Lord's heirs.
Yes, hilariously enough, she was set to marry one of them, as you can see from her guard.
As Diana mentioned towards my dress, I realized how vulnerable I was and felt extremely self-conscious. I wrapped my arms around myself as Diana let out a sigh.
Well, since you do not belong here, the obvious thing to do is to send you home.
I couldn't help but stare wide-eyed at Diana. She was really going to send me home? Really? I couldn't believe my ears. You will really send me back?
Of course. It should be easy to do once everything is over. It'll be like you never left the human world.
Wait, like I never left the human world? What do you mean by left the human world? Diana stared before chuckling softly and gesturing to the room and beings within it.
Dear, do you not realize where you are? You are in the demon world.
My mind went blank. It couldn't be. I couldn't be in the demon world. No way. No way in hell. I felt myself back up against the wall behind me, suddenly afraid. I was in another world. How? That was impossible. Diana stepped towards me, both of her hands softly trying to show she meant no harm, as she positioned them in front of her body.
Do not panic. We will send you back now, so there's nothing to worry about.
How will you power the spell? Bringing someone here is no easy task, but sending someone back consumes much more energy.
I'll use what energy I have now and rest. We can organize the siege another time when I fully recover. It's not like the demon lord can escape the portal we've trapped him in, so we do have some time to spare.
You'd waste time and energy on this human. We must strike now while the Demon Lord is weakened.
But the human doesn't belong here. She needs to go home.
Shall I prepare the return spell?
Do. I grant you permission to use my energy to power the spell.
With a nod, the lanky man held out his hand towards the wall. I looked over in the direction it was aimed at. Diana's shadow. I watched as Diana's shadow simply stood against the wall, mirroring the movements of the real succubus in the room. Before my eyes, the shadow began to morph and expand on the wall on its own. I looked back to Diana to see her wrapping her arms around herself and curling her shoulders over as if she was in pain. Her nails embedded themselves into her forearms, and I could barely make out a painful hiss escaping her clenched teeth. Was the spell hurting her that badly? I turned back to the wall to see Diana's shadow. shaking and vibrating as if it was resisting the chains the man was forcing on it.
You will obey my command. Open the gates to the void, and allow passage to the world we seek.
Upon Diana's final word, her shadow burst and expanded into an oval-shaped doorway. I stared wide-eyed at the passage before a hand placed itself on my shoulders, forcing me to look over. The one with the spear gently pressed my shoulders forward and looked down at me with almost a stern face.
You must leave now. The faster you leave, the quicker we can close the void.
Go! Go! Go get married!
I quickly nodded and lifted the bottom of my dress, stepping forward to make a run for the passage. However, before I could bolt towards my freedom, a snarl echoed through the room.
How dare you interfere with my summoning?
Hello, bitch. You frickin' bitch. At that very moment, Diana began to scream, arching her spine and throwing her head back. Around her body were red-tinted bolts of lightning flashing and shocking her form.
No! Human! Use the passage! Now!
He didn't have to tell me twice. I bolted towards the portal, diving forward as I neared it, but I was forced back by a burst of energy and a flash of red light. I fell to the floor, almost slamming my head onto the stone. Yeah!
Human will never, ever leave this world alive!
You spineless worm!
Close the portal! The Demon Lord might get through!
But the human...
Close it!
As commanded, the man pulled his hand back, visually forcing his arm back behind his body. And Diana's shadow quickly began to morph back into a simple shadow. The electricity around Diana faded away, and she began to tip forward. The man with the spear dropped his weapon and caught Diana in his arms, cradling her to his body as she panted and gasped for air.
I don't sense the Demon Lord anywhere.
The worm has to scurry through the shadows to try and fight back. He'll be dead soon enough.
How is she, Garth?
Diana seemed to look uninjured, but her body was twitching from the aftermath of the magic attack. Her visible eyes were shut tight as she dug her fingers into the guard's jacket to cling to him. You know, and that kind of part right there, I kind of wish there was another image, believe it or not, of that, because that would be an awesome. As her eyes opened, I saw not a blood ruby red color, but I saw a cold and unfriendly golden color painted over her irises. Her mouth opened as she panted for air. I could see hunger in her facial expression, but she continued to stare at the wall, not wanting to make eye contact with anyone.
There are no physical wounds, but she's been weakened. I must give her my energy so she can recover.
The man swiftly moved and hooked an arm underneath Diana's knees, lifting her up bridal style. She clung to his jacket, shivering. The spear that had fallen to the floor faded into black and purple mist as he quickly left the room with her in his arms. My mind, however, began to panic. I couldn't go home. Why was I being forced to stay? Damn the Demon Lord! This wasn't right.
There's an imp in the castle. That is the only way the Demon Lord could have been able to interfere.
You! Guards by the door! Hunt it down!
A pair of guards that were apparently by the door saluted the one commanding them and ran off. I felt out of place, alone, terrified as to what was going to happen. The Demon Lord wanted me here, and his words pounded at my mind. How was I going to get home? Would I ever be able to go home? I looked up to see the winged person hovering near me, before they moved and sat on their knees on the stone ground beside me.
We'll get you home, okay? Diana just needs a little rest, okay? She needs more than rest. She needs to use a different spell to send her back. The Demon Lord will expect her to use the shadow spell again.
How about the normal way? I'm sure we can connect to a witch, or even the warlock she used before, to reopen a portal to the human world.
The warlock she used to get to the human world died, remember? And he was the most powerful warlock in the human world. Practically a god himself. What other human could be used to open the portal without another human dying?
It was merely a suggestion. The faster we get this human home, the faster we can move on and finish off the Demon Lord.
Well, what are we going to do with the human?
We can give her a room to rest in. Humans need sleep after all. Maybe by the time she wakes up, we'll think of a solution. Come.
The woman with rabbit ears looked down at me and lowered her hand to me, inviting me to take it. She had a kind but concerned expression on her face, so I trusted her. I slowly took her hand and began to stand up, as the fairy figure brushed off the small patches of dust that had accumulated on my dress. I couldn't do anything. I was forced to listen to the beings around me because there was nothing else I could do. Without them, I couldn't get home. My heart ached, but I had to accept my predicament.
Here, I'll bring you to the open ambassador's room. You're free to rest there for now.
Ah! What the hell? Oh, there it goes. What about Diana? Or we could just say okay, it doesn't really matter. On that choice anyway. The floating person giggled softly as the woman with rabbit ears cleared her throat.
She'll be fine. She's being taken care of right now.
Why not just say she's getting fucked?
Yep, she's getting woohoo.
And the brute strikes again with the lack of tasteful filtering between his brain and his mouth. You still have yet to prove me wrong about my expectations of you.
Keep testing me, assassin. I'm not afraid to rip your spine out of your body and use it as a back scratcher.
All I can think of is that, in this sort of party sort of situation, I feel like he is the muscle, which basically means he wields an axe or something. So he's more of a tank. He is more of the ninja, so he's like an assassin, which is basically what he said. And he would, stealthily kill people, which would mean his DPS would be way up there. She is definitely a mage, because look at that damn staff. And her, I would call her the healer. Or, I believe this is a girl. I hope this is a girl, but I believe this is 100% a girl.
You can very well try.
Ugh! Would you both knock it off? Come. Everything will be taken care of.
Before I could protest, the woman led me out of the room and into the hall. I kept my eyes down, trying to take in more of the situation I was in. I was trapped in the demon world, and Diana was out of commission. The demon lord had plans for me, but what exactly was he aiming for? I could have been bait. I could have been revenge. I didn't know, nor could I figure out. Now, at least I was safe. At least I hoped I was safe. The woman led me to a room that particularly screamed medieval fantasy. Everything was clean, but it still had that old age feel, as if no one had ever stepped foot into the room until that moment.
Rest here for now. When Diana is well again, we can discuss what to do.
Thank you. I nodded to the woman before she gently curtsied and left, closing the door behind her. I took a moment to observe my surroundings, interested in understanding the aesthetics. This was fantasy turned into reality. It was like I had gone back in time. Why, though? Was the demon world really that behind in times? Or did magic supersede technology, and this was the result. Despite the situation I was in, which was beyond heartbreaking and terrible, my curiosity began to fester in my mind, as if I was given a golden opportunity to learn something new. However, my thoughts began to drift, and I felt myself becoming weak and dizzy, no doubt from the shock of the trauma I had gone through. I stumbled towards the bed, needing to sit down and let everything settle in without passing out. As my rear hit the mattress, however, I let out a small, pleasured sigh. Holy crap, this is a comfy mattress! Of course, I don't know if she was like it would be that ecstatic like that, or holy crap, this is a comfy mattress sort of deal. I felt myself fall back, and my entire body simply melted into the softness beneath. My body, it was like I was sleeping on a cloud. Was that possible? Demon magic may have had something to do with it, but I was certain that I was drifting into almost a blissful sleep just by lying on the blankets and mattress. I really want this bed, you know? Not caring that I was still in my dress, I closed my eyes and drifted to sleep. I needed the rest, since Diana wouldn't be available for a while anyway. Darkness surrounded my mind, my dreams remaining silent, and a hushed in the cool and calm black. No nightmares appeared and no sounds were made. I was simply resting, and that was all my body needed. I let my thoughts wander in my subconsciousness, thinking about what was going to happen now. What will the boys do when they realize I'm gone? What will he do? I imagined him finding a way through to the demon world and pulling me back to where I belonged, wrapping me in his arms and swearing to never let me go. I would be relieved, and we would be married just as we planned. How unrealistic was that? I had to be realistic now. I was stuck, and the only one who seemed to be able to send me back was Diana and her companions, whoever they were. I had to trust them, whether I liked it or not. Eventually, I did rise from my sleep, somehow fully refreshed and calm. How could that have been?
Did you have a good rest?
I turned my head to see Diana at the door, arms across and leaning against the door's archway. She had a look of concern and pure curiosity on her face as she awaited my answer. Why not? Diana stared at me, slightly shocked. Did she not expect me to ask?
Oh. Well, yes. I'm fine now. I've got rest.
That's good. Diana shook her head and stepped into the room, closing the door behind her.
So we need to find another way to get you back to the human world. It won't be easy, but I believe it can be done by tonight, at least.
Tonight? Really? Diana nodded and crossed her arms again, leaning on one hip.
It will take time to get our shadow agents to gather the necessary supplies, but they are not hard to obtain, being that we're in a position of power. You must be lucky.
What do you mean? Diana said before casting a short spell under her breath. In front of me appeared a floating map, almost like a hologram. It showed an entire world with mountains, plains, and forests, as it all was surrounded by sea and underwater. Underwater. Really? Really, Melly? Underwater? It just says water. Where the hell did the word under come from? Diana pointed at a marker that had a purple banner as its tip. It was marked in the center of some mountains and forest area. It was almost the very center of the map.
That is where we are currently, the center of the abyssal plains.
Diana then ran fingers in a circle around the marker, showing a perimeter around it.
Everything we need for the spell is within this area. It will just take time to gather the materials and prepare it.
I nodded, understanding the situation. I was going to hopefully be able to go home tonight, which was better than not going home at all. So what should I do until then?
My suggestion? Stay in this room. I can mark this room as off limits so that no demon may enter that would confuse you for an intruder and kill you.
I gulped. I did not want to die. As Diana made the magical map disappear, she shrugged.
However, I cannot stop you from whatever you wish to do. Just don't leave the castle.
I nodded as she turned to leave. As she stepped out, Diana looked back to me with a reassuring look.
We'll get you back to the human world. I promise you that.
Finally, she left me alone in the room. I let out a small sigh and looked up at the ceiling. I had to wait until tonight to actually do anything. What was I going to do? Part of me agreed with Diana, suggesting wanting to stay in the room and be safe in case the guard didn't know who I was and would kill me on sight. My curiosity, however, wouldn't leave me alone and wanted me to explore the castle. I was handed an opportunity to explore a castle in the demon world, and part of me did not want it to go to waste. I was torn on what to do. We'll stay in the room this time around. I explored last time. It was better to be safe than sorry. I fell back onto the bed. I'm sorry, I got distracted by a alert thing. Sorry, guys. Let's start this lovely sentence from square one, shall we? It was better to be safe than sorry. I fell back onto the bed and closed my eyes, contemplating taking a nap to make time go by faster. Staying in my room was the best option for me, both so that I wouldn't get lost and that I'd be okay in case the guards were on duty. I let out a small sigh before looking around the room. Was there anything I wanted to look at closer?
Excuse me.
Before I could find anything, I looked to the door. Towards the voice, peeking in, was the rabbit woman, cautiously remaining behind the door while looking at me.
Are you feeling okay?
Huh? Yeah, I am, thank you. Please come in. I trusted this woman, despite barely knowing her. She assisted me in coming to this room, and she was one of Diana's comrades, so I felt I could put my trust in her. The woman nodded before stepping into the room, and closing the door behind her, she turned to me and stood by the door.
I'm assuming Diana told you about the situation.
Yeah, I'll be back home tonight. That's the hope, anyway.
Yes. We sent our agents as soon as we knew what we had to gather. We're positive they will turn up before nightfall, and we'll be able to cast a gateway spell.
I nodded and let out a small sigh. It would be a long wait, but it would be worth it. If it worked. The woman, however, took a step forward.
May I ask you something?
I looked to the woman, slightly confused. Sure. Go ahead. What is it?
Well,
I watched as the woman reached up and rubbed one of her ears, almost in nervousness. What was she nervous about? Finally, she spoke again, releasing her ear.
would you mind if I asked you about the human world?
The human world? Why would she be curious about the human world? She was a demon that looked like... She was a demon that looked like a anthropomorphic rabbit. Please tell me I said that right, guys. I don't know. The woman hugged her large staff against her body as she shrugged.
How are things like in the human world? Is there equality amongst your races? We've only heard stories, but since you're a human yourself, you would know.
My mind ran back to the social life of the human world. At least in America, we claimed to be equal. but we had major prejudice amongst our races. Whether we liked it or not, I found myself to be on neutral ground, not wishing to be extreme on either opinion, but knowing the difference between what was morale, right, and wrong. I looked to the woman and shook my head, making her eyes widen slightly. We're not exactly equal. I mean, we try, but we're pretty divided. However, it's only one of many problems we face. The woman nodded before walking over and sitting down on the bed beside me.
I see. Are there major wars fought because of it?
In a way, we have marches and movements, but we at least try not to escalate it to war. Where I live, it's better to resolve things without violence. True frickin' fact. There's so much violence going on and so much hate. That's a good frickin' fact.
That's smart. I hope that equality can be found in your world.
I hope so too one day. That'd be the greatest thing ever. What about here? The woman shook her head, her smile turning a bit grim. I could tell that things were rough here, just from looking at her expression.
We have sort of a caste system here. What kind of demon you are determines what life you live. Demons of Lilith, like Diana, are usually royals and nobles, while demons like me are much lower in the ranks.
I could hear her anger and shame just from her voice alone. Were things really that bad here? That's horrible. I'm so sorry.
It's alright. That's why I joined the rebellion. We intend to make changes, make it better. I want to be part of that and help fix things.
There was a confidence in her words that didn't match the look in her eyes. She knew something was off in what she said, but she expressed it anyway. As her reply to me, I didn't know whether or not to prod or keep silent.
It's alright.
I was doing so well. I wouldn't be here long, so I decided to keep my mouth shut. The woman shook her head out, as if she was gathering the thoughts from her mind, and looked at me.
So, you are getting married. You must be excited to get back with your family and soon-to-be partner.
Huh? Oh yeah, I'm excited to go back. For a brief moment, I had nearly forgotten that I was getting married. My mind began to wander to the one who was waiting for me, making my heart ache as I looked down at my lap. The rabbit woman looked down as well.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you upset, but you will be home soon.
I nodded. I shouldn't have let it get me down, but I really did miss being in the human world. I think anyone in my situation would understand, especially since I was a bride. I looked at my hand, seeing my engagement ring, and imagining the wedding ring that was made for me, replacing it. Soon enough, it would be on my finger, and I would be able to continue living my life as normal. Pulling myself out of my thoughts, I looked at the woman as she stood and bowed to me.
Well, I shall leave you be. I will bring food whenever it is ready, so that you don't starve.
Thank you. I appreciate it. With that, the woman left, leaving me alone in my room to wait. I remained in my room until the night came. I was given food which looked like soup. The woman who gave it to me apologized, letting me know the food was scarce until the upcoming harvest, which was a couple of days away. Being that I was only staying the day, I didn't mind much. I was more concerned over what I was given to eat. It was some sort of stew, the mysterious chunks swimming in the broth It smelled surprisingly good, but who knew how it tasted? We're gonna refuse it this time because I think I ate it last time. No. No way. No how! I was not in the mood to try out new things after what I had been through, and this was not something I wanted to try at all. A knock rapped on my door, breaking me out of my train of thought. Huh? Come in. The door opened and revealed Diana with a plate holding things I recognized. Bread and cheese. I let out a heavy sigh of relief before Diana laughed.
I suggest not trying that. As good as it smells, the taste would not sit well.
Instantly, I moved the bowl to the nearby table, thankful that I did not have to try it. Diana handed me the plate and nodded, reassuring me that what was on it was indeed was what it seemed.
It's not much, but it's human food. Eat up.
I will! I began to chow down, feeling the hunger in my stomach dissipate with each bite and swallow. The food I was eating surprisingly was delicious. As I began to crave something to drink, Diana chuckled and formed a small goblet in her hand filled with clear liquid that I assumed to be water. I took it and drank it down, feeling my thirst quenched before I let out a sigh. I feel so much better.
I can tell. Take a moment to finish eating, then we'll head for the ritual.
With that, I'm taking another swig of the water. I looked up at Diana, suddenly excited. Everything was prepared for. Was it possible to go home now? As if she read my mind, she smiled and nodded.
We finished the main preparations. We just need to head over and we'll start.
I couldn't continue eating. My mind went into an obsessive frenzy of wanting to go home. I stood up, moving the plate and goblet to the nearby table. Let's go!
Huh? Are you sure?
I nodded, not wanting to waste any more time. I needed to get home. I was tired of waiting. Diana stared before nodding and heading for the door, opening it for me and exiting after me. As she closed the door behind me, I began to feel my heart flutter and relieve joy. And God, that scared the hell out of me. But thank you. I have no idea, but where you're at, but thank you for subscribing or following. Either or, I'm happy. Diana stared before nodding and heading for the door, opening it for me and exiting after me. As she closed the door behind her, I began to feel my heart flutter in relieved joy. I was heading home. Diana led me down the corridor to the war room, where I had originally arrived, to reveal the table, covered in plants and artifacts of different kinds. None of it made sense to me, but I had to only assume it was what was needed for the spell to work. Diana walked to the table and took note of what she saw, nodding.
This should work.
You're in doubt?
Have to be after the last time we tried sending her home. Do we have a human anchor?
No, you're on your own this time. But we'll make sure you survive casting it.
This spell should work, however, because we'll be using energy material. It will only require a slice of your energy on top of these items, which your guard can refill immediately after this.
Just make sure you don't die casting it.
Diana smiled at her guard before turning to me.
So, Are you ready to return home?
She didn't have to ask. I'm ready. Diana nodded once more before turning back to the table. She lifted her arms over the surface and lowered her head, muttering under her breath. Oop, I cut her off. Damn it. As she spoke, the table began to glow, as did she. A dark purple aura began to surround her, form as she lifted and arched her head back. God damn it! Staring at the ceiling. A glimpse at her eyes made me gasp. Warm golden orbs covered her blood-red irises, glowing with magic. She was deep within the spell, and I could see it slowly draw energy from her body. The items on the table began to gleam widely. Light orbs. Ah, shit. The items on the table began to gleam widely. Light orbs floating from them and dancing in the air above the table surface. They began to weave back and forth with each other, almost as if the lights were dancing to a silent tune. The other demon stepped back as Diana moved her arms up and pointed to the dancing lights. Her fingers pointed into the air, leading the lights to follow where it directed obediently. She drew a large circle in the air, and the lights followed, like a perfect trail spreading out and forming a large void in the air. As they finally stopped moving, they burst into a bright light, causing the demon, as I cover our eyes from it. It engulfed the room, but died down just as fast, revealing a small tear in the air. Diana quickly leaned forward and dug her hands into it before the tear apart, revealing my bedroom. Diana continued to pull the tear open, giving enough space for me to jump through.
Hurry and go through! This is your chance!
I wasn't going to let it go to waste. I gripped the bottom of my dress, rushed forward using momentum to jump into the air, and forward towards the void. I could almost reach it. I could feel the air conditioning of my room right at my fingertips.
She will never leave this world alive!
The Demon Lord's voice rang through the air just as I saw my fingertips pass through the tear. What stopped the rest of my body was a red light and forcing me and Diana back from the opening. Gah! I felt my body fly backwards and slam into the wall behind. I landed on the stone ground. I heard Diana as well land beside me with a painful thud. I looked up and felt her heart break as the tear became wrapped in red lightning, sipping itself close and vanishing into thin air. No, this could not be.
Damn it!
It should have worked. How could it have failed?
We must have missed something. Was there anything we had forgotten?
No. I verified everything myself.
Then why was the Demon Lord able to overpower a gate spell?
I highly doubt you know either, brute.
Stop fighting! We need to make a plan and all of you are just being stupid! Stupid, 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 stupid!
Are you alright, Isaiah?
I'm fine.
I was too lost in my mind to fully understand what was going on around me. I was so close. I felt the other side. I had almost made it home. Why couldn't I go home? Diana grunt of pain next to me made me shoot my head towards her, and I watched her slowly push herself off of the ground and glare at the table.
The demon lords have done something more than simply bring.
What could he have done?
The Demon Lord is incapable of doing anything of the sort. His lackey imps must have done something to her.
A spell?
Curse.
I looked to the rabbit woman, seeing her stare wide-eyed at me. The other demon stared at me as well, and suddenly I felt like I was on display. Was something wrong with me?
She will not leave the demon world alive. He must have placed some sort of curse on her to prevent her from leaving this plane. In order to leave, she'd have to die.
What? My mind went blank. Did the demon lord really curse me? Was I forced to stay in this world until I died? I could never go back?
Are you suggesting a barrier curse?
That would explain the red energy that sealed the tear.
Excuse me guys, just 1 second.
What dark magic like that requires?
One of 1,000 demons. He must have sacrificed part of his army to cast a curse on her that would prevent her from leaving.
Do you notice that desperate for him? The only way to break that kind of curse is to kill the caster, the demon lord himself.
She's trapped here until this war is over.
My body began to shiver violently. The demon lord killed 1,000 demons just to trap me here. Why? Why? I slammed my fist into the ground and began to scream. I want to go home! Why? I could feel the sympathy and anger in the room, but I didn't care. I was beyond livid. I was far past broken. I was seeing red. Ah! As my voice ripped through the air, a bright light erupted through the room. Once again, everyone covered their eyes, but Diana quickly scrambled to get on her knees and cover me with her body. She held me tightly as the light invaded the space and slowly began to fade. As the light finally died, everyone moved their hands to see what had happened. In the air was a white tear that was slowly opening, facing down towards the table. Something was coming. I could feel it in the air. The guard summoned his spear and pointed it at the tear, glaring at it and gritting his teeth.
Something's coming!
In reply, Diana summoned what looked like a saber and placed it in front of us.
Ready yourselves! It could be the demon lord!
The other demons in the room readied themselves and stared at the tear, either holding a weapon or preparing a spell. I felt the air change, becoming heavier as the tear began to grow. The energy around it began to pulsate, making everyone in the room that much more tense. I stared at the tear as well, frightening as to what was coming. Was it the demon lord? His minions? My mind began to cycle through the fearful ideas of what was about to appear. Oh, we all know it's the boys. My heart almost stopped. Fallen from the tear and landing on the table was the 5 incubi brothers. They were piled on top of one another, having come through one at a time. However, as the last brother landed, the boys fell to one side, toppling off the table and landing on the floor. Ba-boom! The rebels around me stand at the fallen pile of incubi, confused and surprised as the tear in the air closed. The org man was the first to lower his sword.
What the hell?
Who are they?
Careful, they could be the demon lord's men.
No! The rebels looked to me as I stood up, Diana following and still protecting me, as I stared at the boys on the ground. They all looked dazed and a bit shell-shocked from having fallen twice in rapid succession. I almost couldn't believe it. There they were, right in front of me. My mind couldn't help but remember how I had first met them. They had all been on the floor of my mansion, unconscious and wounded. Now they were in front of me in the demon world. I know them. I stared at the one I was meant to marry. seeing him slowly shake his head and rise from the ground. They came to rescue me. He came to rescue me. My heart became overjoyed and full of warmth and happiness. I was going home. I was going to go home. That was the correct sentence of that lovely sentence right there. The question was, how? As the sight of the boys kept the demon's attention, a second tear opened above them, causing everyone to look up. 4 women dropped down from the tear and somehow managed to fall into the arms of the incubi behind Matthew. So, if we didn't choose Sam, this is who he would be burying.
Whoa! Are you okay?
Eric!
Love, I've got you.
James!
Whoa! Are you alright?
I stared wide-eyed. Their wives came too? I watched as the boys and the girls finally planted themselves at the ground. Before looking around, however, Matthew instantly bolted for me, causing Diana to jump away in surprise. Matthew wrapped his arms around me, and I instantly tensed up from being charged at before taking his scent and physical form. He was here. I wasn't dreaming. He really came for me. He was here holding me.
Are you okay? Are you hurt?
I'm fine. I almost couldn't believe it, but I wrapped my arms around Matthew's torso, pulling him tighter to me as I took in one more whiff of his scent. He smells so nice. However, before I could melt into his arms in relief at his presence, he was forcibly dragged backwards.
Hold it, hold it, hold it!
Whoa!
Huh? I watched as the fairy figure gripped Matthew's hoodie and roughly pulled him away from me with an angered face. Wait, hold on!
Matthew!
Before anyone could react, Matthew spun around and swiped at the fairy. They squeaked and released him, floating higher into the air.
Hands off!
You hands up!
I quickly rushed over and held Matthew's hand, wanting to bring his attention away from the fairy and back to me. I gotta give it that way. It's the best way to get a boy's attention, I think. I reached up and grabbed Matthew's face, pulling him to me, and kissed him. His eyes stared in shock before he melted against my lips and held my head in his hands, kissing me deeper. I closed my eyes in sync with his as I lowered my hands and wrapped them around his shoulders. I was beyond happy to feel him again. At that moment, I didn't even care how he had found me. I was just happy that he was there with me again. Not struggling against the word, just getting a drink. Unfortunately, Matthew and I couldn't stay close for long. The fairy shouting caused us to pull apart to look at them.
He has the same aura as the Demon Lord!
Rubbing her head and glaring at the fairy, Diana stepped up, crossing her arms and rubbing her temple.
Well, he is the son of the Demon Lord.
That's not what I meant! I'm saying...
Come on, let's get you home.
Matthew gently took my hand and tugged me towards his brothers. However, this time Diana stepped in front of Matthew.
I'm afraid she can't live.
And why not?
She's been cursed. She can't leave this plane without dying. But if you wish to kill her pride to bring her back to the demon world, then be my guest.
Did she just say Demon World? She did! She said Demon World! She didn't say Human World! Did you guys catch that? Holy shit! She said Demon World! Whoopsie! Matthew glared at Diana and stepped in front of me protectively.
Why should I believe you?
It's true, Matthew. The Demon Lord cursed me, so I can't leave. I placed my hand on Matthew's shoulders, causing him to turn his head and look at me in surprise. His expression dwarfed from anger to sudden fear.
What? You can't be serious.
We are, but don't worry. We plan to kill the one who cursed her soon enough.
When?
1 week's time.
1 week? What?
Where is this number coming from, Succubus?
We need to fully prepare ourselves for the final stage, which I'm certain will only take a couple of days. We've pinned him into a corner. The Demon Lord will fall.
That's rather bold to assume.
She's right, though. We can prepare everything in that time frame, right?
And if he does the same and attacks us before then?
Hope you guys are enjoying the live stream. It's much appreciated. And we shall continue.
He won't.
I watched as Diana walked over and cleared the table of the materials they had gathered for the gate spell, revealing a physical map of the abyssal plane. She pointed to a spot on the map, a peninsula surrounded by a water labeled as the Decaying Sea.
We'll cast a barrier spell along the edge of the peninsula and around the castle.
Oh my
And
god, I
we'll be
failed!
able to move
I
fast
failed!
until we break it ourselves, which will be during the siege.
Ah! Peninsula! I can't believe it. What did I say? A peninsula. Peninsula! No, it's not the peninsula, okay? It's the peninsula! Ah! We're just gonna change it to the peninsula, okay?
Where would we get the energy needed for that kind of spell?
We won't be using energy.
The other rebel demons in the room suddenly tensed up, staring at Diana in surprise. What was she going to do?
My lady, you're not suggesting...
The Demon Lord has shown how far he's willing to go to win this war. It's only fitting to show the extent we'll go to in response.
As much as I agree with you, this seems a little rash.
What are you guys talking about?
Are they allowed to know?
I plan to put a barrier curse around the Demon Lord's castle and army. It's temporary, so it won't need the blood of 1,000 demons. But it will need the sacrifice of at least one demon life.
And I assume you'll be sacrificing one of my soldiers.
Is this our only option?
There are other options, but they will most likely take a lot of energy to pull off.
It just depends on what we want to do. If we want to do this immediately, then the barrier curse is indeed the best option.
I'm not opposed to performing the curse. As rash as it is, it will make our lives easier in the long run.
You expect me to hand over one of my men? My soldiers joined the rebellion to kill the Demon Lord, not to get their throats slit before even seeing the final battle.
It's wrong, but can we really afford to spend any more energy? Diana already spent a lot trying to send the human back.
What is the other option?
The rabbit woman and fairy moved towards the map and pointed at the peninsula.
We could form tall rock walls around the castle. Box them in.
It will take a lot of our energy, but we can recover in that week period.
And what will stop the Demon Lord from tearing down the walls?
I can imbue the walls with holy magic.
The incubi and I looked at him, all of us equally surprised. A demon with holy magic? How?
How the fuck did you get holy magic? You look and smell like a demon.
Ugh. The guard held up his wrapped hand, letting the beads around it jingle with the sudden motion.
I've had the ability to use holy magic ever since I was taken in by my lady's family. There's no doubt that I am a demon, but I can't recall how I gained this ability.
How is holy magic different than demon magic?
It's white magic. Unlike demon magic, holy magic isn't so finicky. Think of it as warding or dispelling magic. You can't bless air or anything that doesn't have physical form, but you can bless objects to fight back against other forms of magic.
wouldn't be able to escape until we released him.
Why not just trap him forever?
That's idiotic. He would still be a threat regardless. Holy magic doesn't last forever. The stone will crumble eventually.
He's right. We wouldn't be able to keep the walls up forever.
The situation became more and more complicated. The more we discussed it, how were we going to? Both had their prices, but we had to choose one. From the look of it, no one wanted to speak up, so I felt the urge to say something. Maybe I would be the one who would determine everything. But which method would be the best choice? I'm still gonna go with the trap, guys. Everyone in the room looked at me as I finally spoke up. We needed to be better than the Demon Lord. He was willing to sacrifice lives to trap me here, but it only showed how desperate he was to win, and how little he valued life. He would lose this war, one way or another. It wasn't worth losing someone who could help turn the tide of war. When can you put a barrier up?
We can leave after this meeting is over.
Are you sure this is the best choice?
The curse isn't the only option. We need to show that we're better than him. Everyone nodded, some in reluctance, while the others did with confidence. I looked at Dina just in time to catch a twitch from her visible eye, but she shook her head and looked to the rabbit
Are
woman.
you quite positive this will work?
I am very certain. Since it will be just 3 of us going, we can shadow travel there and be back by the morning.
Diana looked at her guard and nodded.
Very well. If you believe it will work, then I trust you will make sure it does.
As the guard nodded and slightly bowed, the other demons seemed to let out a sigh of relief. Were they worried about performing the curse? Diana shook her head before crossing her arms and looking directly at me.
So, since you'll be here for a while, we might as well give you names that you can use to refer to everyone here.
Oh, are we getting human names?
Must we?
Diana rolled her eyes and gestured to each demon, naming them on the fly.
For the sake of time, we'll use simple names. This is Rabbit, our magic advisor, Sergeant, commander of our armies, Shadow, leader of our assassins, and Faye, our nomadic force ambassador.
Sergeant, I'm a commander, succubus. Shouldn't my name be Commander?
It's easier on the tongue, though, to say sergeant.
My lady, what shall they call me?
Diana looked at Sarah for a moment before turning towards me, a look of seriousness emanating from her eyes.
You may call him Sam. He is my personal guard, and he is always by my side.
The other demons and Sarah seemed to be surprised. Was Sarah his true demon name? Why would she give me his true name?
Are you sure?
Call him only if your life depends on it. Do not abuse this permission.
Her eyes seemed to burn as she gazed into mine. Full of hard intent and warning, I mentally noted her seriousness as she ran a hand through her hair.
Well, now that we have a plan and introductions are out of the way, I believe we can end this meeting. We have a lot to accomplish in 1 week.
What about us? You don't expect us to sit around.
Actually, I do. You all don't belong on the battlefield.
What are you talking about?
I will not take untrained and unarmed beings into a war zone.
Hold on! I interjected, stepping forward and crossing my arms at Diana. She seriously wasn't going to make us stay back while she fought the Demon Lord, was she? Well, we are going to say we can fight too. Diana squinted at me, pressing her lips together into a fine line. However, I meant what I said. We could fight too.
You expect me to trust that you can fight in a war?
Let me and my brothers train men. We're demons, for fuck's sake. We know how to fight.
The boys stared at Diana as she turned her head towards Sam. He was right, though. They knew how to train, so they knew how to fight. If they fought with the rebellion, there would be a better chance of winning this war.
You all realize this is a war, correct? You can die here.
We understand completely.
We do as well.
Diana could only stare at our group as we challenged her proclamation. I wrapped my hand around my fiancé's arm, frightened at the idea of participating in a war, but knowing that we needed all the strength we could muster to finish off the Demon Lord. This was the only way that I could go home. Defeated, Diana sighed and rubbed her temples.
Very well. I can't exactly keep you here prisoners, so it will be up to you if you choose to train for battle. However, I highly suggest just staying here and allowing us to handle it.
I nodded, as did the others. This was really happening. We were going to kill the Demon Lord, and we had 1 week to either prepare for war or wait it out. Diana turned towards me and looked down at my outfit. I had nearly forgotten that I was still in my wedding dress until Diana pointed at my chest.
Lumen infine, velum tedescere, serene.
This right here I kind of wish was either one animated or shown a picture of. Ugh. I stared at her, unsure of why. She was speaking in Latin, until I felt the fabric around my body shift and change. I quickly looked down to see my wedding dress morph into an outfit that looked perfect for the demon world. The white top shifted into a long-sleeved, oversized tunic with a leather corset and vest, while the bottom of parts of the gown wrapped around my legs, forming into dark leggings. My shoes stretched into long, knee-high boots.
Oh wow, that looks really good on you.
I blushed, getting used to the feel of the outfit. The corset wasn't tight, but it was still something new along with the rest of the garb. Matthew, however, smiled down at me and kissed over my forehead.
You look really cute.
Cute. Why do guys always have to call something cute? Can't they call us beautiful? That'd be so nice. Thanks.
Faye, Rabbit, you both should finish your preparations and head over to the Demon Lord's castle for the spell.
How are we going to get there?
I'll get us there, no problem.
Just make sure we don't get stuck there or lost.
No promises.
Sarah, make sure the job is done.
I shall, my lady.
Sarah, Faye, and Rabbit began to make their way out of the room as Diana turned to me and my group. As they left, Diana let out a small sigh.
I will take you to some rooms you may rest in.
Thank you, Diana. Diana merely nodded and led our group out of the room towards our new temporary rooms. This entire experience was not something I expected to go through, especially since it was now interfering with my wedding. I was trapped in the demon world, under a curse. I couldn't break without a demon lord being killed, and I was expected to wait. The entire journey to my room became one filled with a wild anger within me. At least Matthew was here to help me through this, but I still couldn't help but let the situation sink underneath my skin. This wasn't fair at all. I knew Matthew could sense my anger as he lightly squeezed my hands, which was gently cupped in his as he walked beside me.
Hey, what's wrong?
Just tell him the truth. I let out a shaky sigh and looked to him, letting it go. It's just unfair, you know. This whole thing has become a large complication mess, and I gritted my teeth and squeezed Matthew's hand back. I didn't want to complain, as things were going to be fixed soon, but it was still infuriating to think that I couldn't do anything immediately. And if you guys do have a partner, it's best to communicate, you know? It's so good to communicate. Matthew slowly released my hand and wrapped it around my shoulder.
Hey, don't worry about it, alright? Think about it as a vacation or something.
A vacation? Matthew grinned and nodded, hugging me slightly to his side.
Yeah, a vacation to, see new sights?
I guess we're going on a sightseeing tour of the demon world. Woo! I couldn't help the amused smile on my face as Matthew tried to make me feel better. It was another reason why I adored him. He did his very best to make sure that I was happy. Despite the crappy situation we were in, I was thankful for that. I wrapped my arms around him and nodded. Thanks, Matthew. Matthew smiled and nodded before kissing my cheek.
You're welcome. Anything for you.
Matthew and I continued to walk down the halls of the castle until we arrived at the same ambassador room I had slept in before. I guess that the room was mine for now. Stepping in, Matthew looked around in slight awe.
Whoa. Plus dates.
I know, you should test out the bed. I had to giggle at Matthew's surprise. It was almost like we had slept into a hotel on vacation. Heck yeah, back to normal. Except this one was forced on us until the end of a civil war. It was mildly messed up, but it was a situation we had to deal with. I walked over to the bed and sat down, letting out a sigh at feeling the softness underneath me. The bed was still as comfy as last night. Matthew, however, began to walk around the room, taking in the sight of the decor.
This is a really fancy room. What about a room the others got?
I smiled, watching Matthew ponder for a moment, before replying to his statement. Yeah, apparently this is an open ambassador room. I was able to sleep here when I arrived. Matthew stared at me dumbfounded for a moment before slapping his forehead and shaking his head.
Right. Time's different here. Holy crap, I forgot about that.
Wait, huh? I'd been confused as to what Matthew meant. What did he mean about time being different here? Matthew looked up at me and grinned sheepishly.
Well, how do I explain this about making it confusing?
Matthew rubbed the back of his head, staring at the fireplace before speaking.
Well, you see, time moves faster here compared to the human world. Like, much faster. If I remember right, then I think the time difference is every 5 hours here is 1 hour there? Maybe?
Wait. Huh? So if I was here for a day, then... Matthew took a moment to do the math before nodding and speaking again.
Yeah, that's right. You were gone from the human world for about 5 hours.
5 hours? I was astonished. The time difference was really The time difference was really prominent and a little disorienting. Didn't that mean time moved faster here? I was getting confused, holding my head to try and unscramble my thoughts as they collided. What the hell? As the collided. What the fuck? Shouldn't that be a Y say as they collided? Oh well. Matthew, however, rushed over to me and sat down next to me. Hip to hip.
Hey, don't worry about it, okay? We found you, so that's all that matters.
I could only nod before looking at the ground. It was a lot to take in, but at least I wasn't really missing for a day in the human world. However, I was going to be here for a week, so in accordance to the time difference, I would be missing for more than a day. How was everyone at home going to react? I could only hope that something was used as a cover to delay the wedding, or the like. I looked up to Matthew, now a bit concerned.
Huh? What is it?
What's happened while I was missing? Matthew frowned a bit and rubbed his head, running his hands through his fluffy hair as he spoke, staring at his knees.
Well, when you didn't come with the rings, we got kind of worried and tried to call you. When you didn't pick up, we kind of panicked, but Irene and Iridescent decided to rush over to the house to see what had happened. They came back, saying you were gone. We pretty much scrambled to use our magic to wipe everyone's memories, reschedule everything, and use the time to find out what happened.
Matthew pressed his lips together, most likely remembering what he felt during my absence. I felt bad, but there was nothing I could have done to stop it. Matthew shook his head and continued.
I guess we have to thank Simon for finding you. Without him, we wouldn't have figured out what happened.
Simon? Matthew nodded before stuffing his hand in his pocket and pulling out the infuriating stuffed animal. Simon blinked a couple of times before looking up at me and giggling like he usually did. I love Simon. Simon! Simon jumped from Matthew's hand into my arms and crawled up onto my shoulder, becoming immobile, like a doll. Once he settled between my neck and shoulder, I gave him a little pat before looking back to Matthew. Well, he was the one that hid the rings. I had to find him.
I know, but after you were taken, he helped us pinpoint where you were, and bam! Here we are.
Matthew chuckled a bit as he ruffled some of Simon's fur.
I guess this little furball was useful after all.
That's because Simon does care. He might be a little, skittish, but he loves you. I could only smile before leaning over to kiss Matthew's cheek, making him gasp slightly. At least you found me. Soon we'll be able to go home and get married like we planned. It gave me a little hope to let the thought sink in. How did I get skin? It gave me a little hope to let the oh my god. I might as well be Simon right about now. It gave me a little hope to let the thought sink in. Despite the terrible situation we were in, we would soon be able to go home. I was positive we would win this war and everything would work out just fine in the end. Matthew seemed to agree, nodding as well with a smile.
Yeah, we'll go home soon.
Matthew wrapped his arms around me and nuzzled the side of my head, making me softly giggle. My body felt relieved to have him near me, causing me to wrap my own arms around him. My heart was jumping with joy regardless of the situation we were in. Simon took to the cue to hop off my shoulder and quickly skittered across the floor and up the fireplace mantel, resting on it with the decor that sat upon it. Matthew, however, soon released me and fell back onto the bed, feeling its softness.
Man, it's been so long since I felt a demon bed.
What's the difference from a regular bed? Matthew grinned up at me and crossed his hands beside his head, lounging back on the mattress.
Well, demons don't sleep in this world, so we get very comfy beds just so we can lay back and relax on.
Wait, demons don't sleep?
I'm too paranoid that people will kill us in our sleep.
Then how the heck do you function?
Energy and food. As long as we have both, we can pretty much be awake 24/7.
The way Matthew seemed relaxed about the whole situation. I said situation when it says thing. The way Matthew seemed relaxed about the whole thing, it seemed like being here. A part of me was curious on whether or not he liked being in the world more than the human world. but I had to remember he went to the human world of his own accord. Besides, he was ready to marry me and live his entire life in my world. Matthew stretched and let out a groan before relaxing back on the bed sheets, letting out a small yawn.
Oh, I'm tired. Wanna hit the hay?
Don't do that. You let out my yawn. Good lord. I nodded, feeling exhausted, run over me, causing me to lie back and cuddle up to Matthew, nuzzling into his shoulder. He chuckled before wrapping an arm around me.
I love you so much. I promise we'll get home soon.
I smiled, kissing his cheek before closing my eyes and drifting to sleep. Tomorrow was going to be a long day. However, as I opened my eyes, I found myself not looking at Matthew or in my bed, but I felt cold ground beneath me and something tightly wrapped around my neck. What the? Nightmare again. I looked down, seeing my skin dusty and dirty, which only added more confusion. What was happening to me? I reached up and gasped once more as I felt a familiar collar around my neck, a chain dangling from the front and running behind me. I instinctively grabbed the collar, trying to pull it from my neck, but as I did, something yanked the chain connected to it and caused me to fall back, knocking the wind out of me. Ah! I turned my head to the chain pull to see a familiar imp demon glaring down at me and gripping onto my chain. It was the same imp demon from the vision Matthew showed me when Diana came around, but how could this be? I quickly grabbed the chain and tried to yank it from his hands, wanting to be free, but found no strength to actually pull it out. The imp merely cackled and pulled the chain again. Huh! Making me fall forward onto my stomach. This would be a very perverted scene right about now. Very perverted. Ugh. I froze. This was another dream, and I could tell that Matthew was going to be the villain once again. My mind began to panic as I scrambled up to my hands and knees, looking around at the predicament I was in. I was in a large steel cage. My chain hung out between the bars. In the hands of an imp guard in my cell, I had no neighbors, nor did I hear anyone else in the space with me. And I ended with that. I need a drink, says, so I'm stuttering more than I want to. Woo! This was definitely a dream, and I needed to wake up before Matthew came around. Who knew what he would do with me? This was a dream, after all. I looked around the room, slowing my breath, and trying to think logically. What could I do? The first thing was to do something about the chain around my neck. Then I could try and break the door down somehow and be free. Seemed like a good idea. I quickly grabbed the chain again and swiveled on the ground to be on my bottom, locking my feet against the door and pulling the chain back. I managed to get some purchase and okay. I managed to get some purchase, and luckily the imp couldn't manage to pull me forward from my struggle. A large bolt of red lightning suddenly traveled down the chain and shocked the collar around my neck, causing me to release a soundless scream. My body became electrocuted in red light and energy, sending waves of pain through every part of me. As he finally stopped, I let out a gasp and fell back onto the ground, shaking from the aftermath. My body felt entirely jittery, and licks of pain brushed over my nerves from the shock. What the hell? I could barely look over at the imp from the pain I was feeling, seeing him smirk at what he had done. However, as soon as I saw the grin appear on its ugly lips, a foot jammed into the side of the imp's head, causing it to buckle over. Huh?
You fucking pig fawn! What did you do?
My eyes glanced over to see Matthew in his demon form, glaring daggers at the fallen imp with his foot jammed into his cheek. As he looked at me, still angered with a snarl across his expression, I gasped, seeing the familiar cold gold color over his eyes. This evil Matthew had returned. Gingerly Matthew took up my chain and pulled me to the door, leaning in and keeping the chain beneath his hand so he could bring my head as close to him as he could without me being pulled against the bars on the door. Staring into his eyes, I was surprised to feel calm and almost hopeful that maybe this was a different Matthew, one who wasn't cruel and one of ill intent. Then again, he kept me in the cell and didn't release me, so this was a sign that I was wrong. Despite this, he spoke calmly and almost comfortingly.
Did he hurt you?
Of course, I nodded. Whatever electrocution the imp had done made me feel like I was dying for a split moment. Matthew, in response to my reply, glared at the imp with a deadly pair of eyes, causing the victim in question to slink back against the wall.
I order you not to hurt her. If she's hurt, then she can't give me proper energy, and I won't be able to rule this world properly. Do you know how much of a problem that would be?
The imp opened his mouth to protest, but as soon as he did, Matthew formed a knife in the air and chucked it into his open mouth, a splash of blood erupting from behind the imp's head as the knife embedded itself into the back of his throat. So imagine that. Got that in your head? Okay, we're gonna move on. With a garbled whimper, the imp slowly collapsed to the ground, dying at last. I, however, could only watch, horrified, with my hands over my mouth. What was going on? I have a feeling she would probably have done that too. Matthew turned back to me and pulled my chain slightly, causing me to look back at him with fearful eyes.
Now he won't hurt you anymore.
Why? Why are you doing this? Let me go. Matthew's face slowly shifted into a cold, sadistic glare.
I would. But how will I know that you won't run away from me?
I began to panic. I wanted to be free. I wanted to run. But Matthew here wasn't going to let me go. And I didn't want to stay in the cell any longer, despite every fiber in my body wanting me to awaken. I couldn't. I promise I won't run. I had to plead with him. If I was so important to him, then he cared enough about me to listen. Matthew, however, chuckled.
Promises don't mean anything here. The last promise made to me was that Pig Fawn's word that he wouldn't hurt you. You saw how that turned out.
But Matthew,
Do not call me that!
His voice rang in my ear, violently pounding against my eardrums and causing me to wince violently. I cupped my hands over my ears, shutting my eyes from the pain, before feeling Matthew draw back, sliding his hand to the end of my chain.
I'm not in the mood to take your energy now. I'll come back another time.
With a flash of blue energy, the chain in his hand vanished and reappeared above me, giving me enough slack to let me lie down, but only if I was directly underneath it. I grimaced and pulled at the chain, wanting to be free from it, but only heard the chuckle of Matthew Cruel's sadism as he turned and began to walk away.
You better be prepared when I get back. I've got a world to run after. Can't spend all my time making sure you're ready.
A violent quake ran through my body and I began to struggle harder. making him laugh as he left the hall out of my sight. Let me go! Let me go! I shut my eyes tightly, pulling and tugging as much as I could. Despite it being to no avail, I screamed once again, this time breaking the illusion around me and waking up at last. Let me go! I sat up screaming through the air. As my hands collapsed themselves around my neck, my screams reverberated through the room, barely letting me notice Matthew falling out of bed beside me. Kaboom! I must have kicked him so hard. Let me go! I quickly looked over at the sound of a hard thump on the ground, seeing Matthew's curly head peek out from over the side of the bed. His hand ran over his hair as a pained groan escaped his lips. Oh my god. Ignoring what had just happened to me, I scrambled across the bed and slid off of the bed to kneel beside Matthew. Luckily, he wasn't badly hurt, but he rubbed his head, obviously disoriented from falling out of bed. To add more insult to injury, Simon had crawled down from the mantel and began to poke Matthew with his baby knife. Thankfully, the knife wasn't actually sharp, so all it did was prod and poke at Matthew's skin without drawing blood.
Simon, knock it off!
Matthew flailed his arms, almost knocking Simon away with his hand. Taking the hint, Simon jumped onto the bed and began to hop around on top of it as his own distraction while I looked to Matthew. I'm so sorry. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Matthew grimaced, stretching his back and neck before shaking his head and looking up at me, slightly bleary-eyed from sleep.
Are you okay? Did you have another nightmare?
I looked down at the ground between us, remembering the nightmare I was trapped in. I could only nod, pressing my lips together, causing Matthew to frown.
I'm sorry. Do you want a hug?
Yes. Despite the nightmare, I still loved Matthew. I needed him with me. I knew the dream I was having weren't real, and even if they were trying to warn me of something, Matthew was still of the man I was going to be married to. The man I was going to be married to. Matthew smiled softly before swiveling onto his knees and hugging me to his body. Laying my head on his shoulder, I wrapped my arms around him and closed my eyes, taking in his reassuring scent. As a set of knocks appeared at our door, however, Matthew and I shot our heads in the direction of the sound.
Boy, time to wake up. We got grub.
Matthew and I looked at each other before scrambling up onto the bed, forgetting that Simon was on it. I slid across the bed and sat down, trying to make it seem like I had just woken up, as Matthew tried to crawl over, but wound up making Simon release a heavy squeak. Once again, Matthew fell off of the bed and landed on the floor, releasing another shot of flame.
Is everything all right in there?
No, Matthew keeps on falling out of the bed. Oh dear.
We're fine.
Yeah, we're just falling out of the bed, that's all. Simon, cackling at Matthew's mistake, scrambled up back onto the fireplace. Manson became a doll once more as I cleared my throat. Come in! As the door opened, Matthew threw himself onto the mattress, placing his head on his hand like he had completely planned to kneel beside the bed as his brothers and their wives entered with plates of food in their hands. He doesn't want to rely on them. Damien and Twila, the ones who were carrying extra plates of food, stopped and stared at us with raised eyebrows. Damien, of course, looked over at the mantel at Simon before smiling and shaking his head, passing his extra plate to Matthew.
Thanks, bro.
He always knows.
Here you go.
Oh, thank you. Twila placed her extra plate in my hands and smiled before walking over to an empty space with Damien and eating. On the plates were sliced fruits, bread, cheese, and some sort of jerky. James and Sam, however, were the only ones who didn't start indulging in what was on the menu.
So, we have less than a week to prepare for the Demon Lord.
No? Fuck me. I'm excited as shit to finally get to kick his ass into the ground.
He was excited before, and he really did. The other brothers seemed to agree, even Matthew. However, I was stuck on the nightmare. I had the nightmare before. I unconsciously rubbed my neck, remembering the feel of the collar around my neck. Doing so caught Iridessa's attention.
Hey, what's wrong? Did you hurt your neck?
I instantly looked up and stared, seeing everyone's now looked at me in curiosity. I shook my head violently and wanting anything to... Blah! I shook my head violently, not wanting anything to know what had happened. I'm fine. I'm fine. The wives seemed unconvinced, but they nodded anyway. The boys, however, focused on the battle ahead of us.
So, do we plan on training like we usually do?
That seems to be the best plan. It's been a long time since we've actually fought in a battle.
Have you fought in one before?
The boys, despite the shame in their eyes, nodded slowly in unison.
Part of us living in our father's castle involved receiving the occasional unexpected visitor.
Holy crap, man. I remember one time there was this group that just stormed in and tried to take on the old man, but he sent James to take care of him. I've never seen James so pissed off before.
That's because they threatened to burn the castle down if I didn't surrender. Obviously, that was out of the question.
Well, Sam, what about you when you got into those fights with the army generals? They weren't too happy about you being so testy with them.
They got cocky and thought they could push me around. Fuck them and good riddance.
The more I listened, the more the battle stories seemed more about James, Eric, and Sam. Damien obviously stayed out of fighting, but what about Matthew? I looked at Matthew, seeing him simply eat his food, staring down at his plate. Did he have nothing to add to this conversation? We are gonna ask you. Matthew looked up at me in surprise, a piece of jerky wedged between his teeth and lips. I fought back, giggling at the sight, but as everyone turned over and looked at Matthew, I relaxed a bit and waited. I was curious to see if Matthew had any stories of his own to tell. To my surprise, Matthew swallowed the jerky in his mouth and shook his head.
No, I wasn't the fighting type. Never have been, really.
My mind flashed back to him fighting Malix and how he managed to not only duck and dodge Malik's gun, but also make Swiss cheese out of the devil in question. Why would Matthew lie? Sam scuffled and spit into the fireplace, making us all look over at him.
What a crock of bullshit, Pipsqueak.
Bullshit! What the hell is that supposed to mean?
Don't fucking play dumb with me. I remember you massacring an entire gang of imps because they looked at your mom funny. I was the one who had to clean that shit up.
I suddenly went wide-eyed at Matthew, who in turn stared right at me with a fearful frown on his face. He got into fights here. I guess it was expected of a demon to at least get into one fight in their life, but Matthew and massacre?
No, it wasn't like that. It wasn't me.
Like hell it wasn't.
Dude, shut up!
Make me!
I will!
Sam and Matthew jumped out of their seats and barged at each other, slamming their foreheads together and snarling. This is so Dragon Ball Z style right here. Fire burning in each other's eyes, I quickly rushed up and pulled at Matthew's arm, trying to bring him back to the bed. Matthew, calm down.
Sam, knock it off.
Despite Carrie also pulling Sam's arm, neither of us could pull our incubus away from the other as they battled each other with their eyes. The air in their room became full of tense energy until suddenly both of the boys were swatted over their heads.
Fuck! Ow!
Both of you, that's enough!
Big brother, I knew it. I knew it. I looked up to see James holding his fist. I looked up to James holding his fist that he used to sock his brothers with. A glare painted all over his face. Matthew and Sam looked up at their eldest brother, both irritated at being hit, but silent enough to know not to talk back. A moment passed before Sam stood up straight and shook his head, finally allowing Carrie to pull him back to a spot where they could sit down. Matthew, on the other hand, straightened up and continued to glare at James, almost in defiance. Something sparked in his eyes, something that made him worried. So I pulled his arms back, trying to catch his attention. Hey, come on. Matthew finally looked at me, slowly receding back to his normal gaze, before nodding and rubbing his head over the newly forming bruiser while sitting down beside me.
Well, this is an interesting family reunion.
Diana's voice suddenly made all of us turn to the door to see her and Cyril in the doorway, with Diana leaning against the archway. As she pushed off and stepped in, Cyril followed and closed the door.
Can we help you? Possibly, if you all want to survive this war and go home. Especially you, my dear.
Diana looked over to me and crossed her arms under her bosoms. What did she mean? Diana ran a hand through her hair and looked around the room, pressing her lips into a fine line.
So, about all of you participating in the war, you all obviously need to train.
I'm gonna save this, guys, right here. Oh. Auto. Right here, then. There we go. Everyone nodded in agreement to Diana's statement. While we weren't battle ready, we still needed to at least know how to defend ourselves. Diana, however, looked to me.
You, most of all.
Huh? Me? I was suddenly confused. How come I was the odd one out that had to be ready the most? The last thing I remembered about me training was that Diana was against the idea altogether. Diana sighed and rubbed her temples.
Apparently, there are guidelines to breaking this curse. Not only do we have to kill the Demon Lord, but you have to be nearby when it happens for the curse to even break.
That makes no sense. Where did you learn this?
Shadow. He spent the night trying to find alternative ways to break your curse. Unfortunately, we didn't find anything of the sort, but we found the guidelines to break it.
That's always good to find. Well, it still makes no sense.
Even while it doesn't, it's still better to be safe than sorry. I don't want to kill him and then still have you stuck here because of an error.
I could only sigh and take it in, so I had to be there when the Demon Lord fell. Great. Diana waved her hand dismissively through the air, breaking my potential thoughts.
Anyway, we can't have you dying on the way there, and we can't monitor you when we're in battle. You should at least know how to defend yourself. That's why we've come up with a solution.
What solution?
Simple. The other rebel leaders and Sarah have agreed that if you'd like a trainer to enhance your abilities, you can train with one of them.
Okay, I think I meant to save right here, so I'm going to do that. I stared, seeing Sarah step forward with a nod.
Each of the leaders is proficient in a different area of magic and battle strategy, good enough for self-defense. I can't speak for the others, but I can assure you that with Sarah's skill and training methods, you will be well prepared by the time the siege arrives.
Sarah nodded and bowed to me slightly. While I was flattered at the idea, did I really need a trainer? I knew Taekwondo, and I at least knew how to defend myself. Demon or not. Then again, we were in the demon world, where magic was the norm. For this, guys, I am going to say I don't need a trainer. I was fine on my own. Diana stared at me, slightly muffled and slightly in disbelief. Did she not believe me? I didn't ask as Diana pressed her lips into a fine line and looked to the others.
Very well. Do what you believe you should.
With that, Diana turned on her heels and left the room.
Finish eating. Afterwards, you should start training.
Everyone in the room nodded their affirmation as Diana and Sarah left.
Well, it looks like we'll be busy for the next couple of days.
This will be fun. Man, training's gonna suck.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be worth it, though.
Damien's right.
As we all finished eating, everyone left to either train or do things on their own. I left to start my own work, determined to be prepared for what was to come. The Demon Lord wasn't going to win. I wouldn't let him. So I chose to train on my own. It would not be an easy adventure, but I had practice in self-defense from my Taekwondo. If I found a way to add magical energy to the mix, then I would be set. It seemed like a good idea until I managed to kick the bench and the bed frame a couple of times, resulting in a very sore foot. Gah! It was strange. Practicing my self-defense went normally as I've done before, yet I could tell that I was going to need some help. I left my room and to wander the halls, curious as to what to do. Should I go to the rebels for advice? Should I find Diana? I wasn't entirely sure. I felt a bit discouraged, but I pressed forward, letting my feet guide me. Eventually, I was led outside, where a woman on a strange brown and red horse raced through an obstacle course. They were training dummies stationed around each turn, and the woman rammed her sword into each one as she rode by. I was quickly entranced. She looked so natural on the horse, and the way she cut through the dummies was downright breathtaking. I grew mildly envious of her skill. As she spotted me, however, she stopped and pulled the reins on her horse.
Whoa! Huh. You must be the human. You look much prettier than I imagined.
The woman quickly jumped down from her horse and walked over to me, smiling. A kind smile my way as she approached. Oh, hi. I didn't mean to disturb you from your training or anything. I didn't want to stop her or distract her, but the woman waved her hand dismissively with a laugh.
It's all right. You needed a break anyway. I'm Mirth, friend. How can I help you?
I stared at her, surprised to see her being so cordial to me. Then again, I was a guest of the castle, and apparently gossip spread around that a human was staying for the duration of the war. It should not have been a surprise to see such a manner. Still, I shook my head and smiled. It's nothing truly. I just wanted to come out and explore, that's all.
Explore? How strange. Do humans often wander around on their own? I figured the rebel queen would have a bodyguard watch over you.
I shrugged a bit. It really wasn't a human thing. It was more of a Mika thing. I had always naturally been curious, and the world I was in was full of new things to learn. I find it to be a good way to... Hi, Lucky! Hey, honey girl, what's up? Oh, jeez. Interrupted by kitty cats. I do at least find it to be a good way to break away from day-to-day routine and take in the sights, let your mind wander, you know? Mirth stared, nodding a bit. Despite me seeing a slight distance in her eyes, she was a demon after all, so the human mind was a little too different when it came to what we did, and why. I smiled and looked around, seeing the strange purple sky above us and taking in the smell of the air. It really is nice out here, though. I almost wonder why I decided to train alone.
Huh? Training alone? Why?
I looked over at Mirith. Seeing her tilt her head at me in confusion, I shrugged a bit. I'm not really used to having someone train me, or maybe I didn't want to worry about someone watching me train, but I didn't want to bring any of the rebel leaders down.
Wait, they all offered to train you?
I nodded, seeing a glint of amazement form in her eyes. Yeah, they were all open to take me and train me to defend myself, but I already knew how to fight, so I didn't want to take up their time. I'm sure they have much more to focus on and accomplish anyway. It's getting really muggy in my apartment. And with that, I need to clear off my glasses. Yeah, they were all open to take me and treat. Oh, never mind. Skip it. Mir stared for a moment before nodded and straightened up, stretching back a bit.
Understandable, friend. Still, the rebel leaders are amazing fighters. They would have taught you a lot.
Do you really think so? With a nod, Mira turned her head to the outskirts of the training ground we were in, urging me to look over as well. In the distance, I could faintly see a large group of demons and being clashing weapons, fighting like their lives depended on it. At the edge of it was Sergeant, standing crossed-armed, firm as he watched on, concentrated on the group before him. Whoa! That's a cool pic. Seeing them fight without fear or hesitation took my breath away. I could say nothing as I watched the blades and shields collide in chaotic but almost melodic harmony.
Those are the best of the best here in the rebellion.
Huh? Really?
Yeah. All of those fighters rose up in the ranks and are now lower generals and captains, brought up to lead and train the rest of the army with the same tough love the commander gives them.
I looked over to see Marilla smiling, fondling at the sight of the sparring. It made me a bit curious. What about you, Meredith? What are you in the rebellion? Meredith finally broke away from the fight to look at me in surprise before giggling a bit.
I'm technically a lower general like them, but I lead the front lines while they lead the troops that back us up.
Why not train with them, though?
We have different strategies. My section is meant to be a wall of tanks and cavalry, pushing the enemy back and cutting down as many of their number as possible. Their sections are for when the enemy gets through my wall.
So you're the strongest of the generals. Marilla's face began to glow a soft crimson red. She laughed.
No, we're all pretty equally strong. I've just been in the army long enough to know how to train on my own. It's not a big deal, really.
I nodded before looking back to Sergeant and the sparring he monitored. The generals in the field proved to hold their own in fights, but against each other, they were all evenly determined and skilled. Each had some sort of unique strategy, some form of attack they would rely on constantly to deliver the results. The sight inspired me and made me wonder what was my strategy. Mira stepped up beside me and crossed her arms over her chest.
Look at them. All of those soldiers are fighting for the same cause. To stop the Demon Lord and bring peace to this world. That's why we're here.
Yeah, that's why we're all here. I lowered my head and glanced to the ground by my feet, remembering that I was here because of the Demon Lord, but not by choice. The demons more than likely came into the army, fueled by their hatred for the Demon Lord and his tyranny. I felt small compared to them. They had just caused selfishness, reason to fight, and risk their lives for a better future in society, while I was to fight to get myself home. Was I being selfish for having my own reasons to fight? Ruth looked over to me and placed a hand on my shoulder.
Human, if you want, I can help you train. I'm sure that I can get you battle ready in no time.
I looked up at Ruth in surprise. She would train me? From the look of her face, she was genuine to her offer to help me. I considered it for a moment. Did I want someone to help me after all? Sure, why not? Remembering the pain in my foot and the silliness of trying to train on my own made me lean towards accepting her help. I nodded with a smile, placing my hand on hers with confidence. I would love some help, thank you. Ruth returned my smile with her own and nodded.
It would be my pleasure, friend.
Taking a step away from me, Ruth walked over to her horse and ran her hands over his mane before looking back to me.
Go ahead and pick up a weapon. Something here should suit you. There's a barrel over there that has plenty of swords you can use and take for your own.
I took a good look around, spotting the mentioned barrel of sword ready to use. While fighting barehanded was something I was used to doing in Taekwondo, wielding a weapon would protect me better in this war. I mentally nodded at her suggestion before walking over and pulling out one of the swords. To my surprise, the blade was very light, almost like it was made of plastic. This couldn't have been real, right? What the? This is a sword? Ruth laughed and walked over to me, drawing on her own sword and swinging it around in her hand with ease.
It's light steel perfected right here at Lilith Castle. As weightless as a toy, but just as deadly as a common blade. Give it a couple of swings.
I grasped the hilt in both hands and took swings, gasping as I saw the blade cut through the air as if it had proper weight. Whoa!
See? What did I tell you?
Drawing my eyes down the blade, I could tell it was well made, at least for training purposes. As my eyes darted around and landed on a nearby training dummy, another curious thought passed through me. I took a step forward, crouching lower from the sword at my side, and charged forward, arching my blade out and slicing at the dummy with shocking ease. The cloth that was holding it together split apart, and the hay stuff began to pour from the opening, revealing the hard wood that was keeping it upright. Meredith, impressed by my attack, dug her sword into the ground before applauding me with a grin.
Good job, human. Were you well trained in blade work?
I looked at Meredith and shook my head. While I had some sword training in Tai Chi, I was in no way actually proficient with a blade. Before my eyes, the dummy began to reshape and form itself together, ready for another round of attacks. Yep, it was magical, and it was the perfect way to train. Meredith picked up her sword and stepped up to the dummy, grasping the hilt and staring hard at the immobile target.
Focus on your target and decide how you want to bring them down. Use every opening you can
With a shout, Ruth lunged forward and ran her sword across the dummy's neck, effectively beheading it, sending the head flying and onto the ground. I stared, stunning, to see that she had also cut off some of the wooden pole that held the dummy up. Mirth smirked and rested her blade on her shoulder, stepping back and looking to me as the mark reshaped itself.
See? Now you try.
With a smirk, I began to swing and practice slicing and stabbing through my practice opponent. With my new weapon, Mirth continued to spur on me, showing me different ways to cut down the dummy. For the entire week, I would continue this, perfecting a blade, learning how to cut down my enemies in any position and situation necessary. Mirth even began to move the dummy around to give me a moving target. After all, with each time, experimentation and practice. Exhausted and tired, I marched to my room and opened the door, surprised to see Matthew already there. Huh? Matthew? However, what was odd about him being in the room was not that he was there before me, but that he was staring at the fire, eyes glazed over an almost pale blue tint. Something was going on. I walked over and placed my hand on Matthew's shoulder, slowly walking around him to look directly into his eyes. It was almost creepy to see, but he seemed almost dead. Matthew? I gently shook his body, trying to snap him out of whatever trance he was under, but gasped as I spotted a blue ring around his neck. As I did, the air around me became colder and a little darker. What was going on? Panicked, I looked up around, trying to pin down what was causing this. Matthew's voice brought me back to him. Hearing his voice draw out his mouth like an emotional doll, I gripped Matthew's shoulders tightly and shook him again. Matthew! Still nothing. We're gonna smack the crap out of him. Forget the kiss this time. He needs to get smacked. I didn't want to do it, but I had to snap Matthew out of whatever stupor he was in. I bit my lip, shut my eyes. Sorry, Matthew! With a breath, I raised my hand and smacked him across the face, causing him to gasp and the pale blue in his eyes to fade back to normal. Matthew gripped his cheek and stared at the ground before looking up at me in shock, as if he had been stirred awake. Matthew, are you alright? You were spacing out like no tomorrow. Remembering the dull tint in his eyes almost creeped me out. The way his voice came out of his mouth only added to the creep factor of the situation. I wasn't sure what go on. I can't read right now. I'm sorry, guys. I'll be right back. I'll be right back, guys. How to escape kitty cats. Yeah. Okay. Whew. Alright, let's get back set up here. Remembering the dull tint in his eyes almost creeped me out. The way his voice came out of his mouth only added to the creep factor of the situation. I was sure what go a hold of him. I don't know about that sentence right there. Sorry guys, I had to take something to eat. It's good chicken though. Matthew rubbed his cheek and stared at me like I had suddenly grown 3 heads. Why? I frowned my eyebrows as he replied.
Fine. I was just looking at the fire. It's pretty warm.
Every part of me didn't believe him. Then again, something was wrong, and maybe Matthew was becoming a victim of it. I frowned and cupped his cheek, making him lean into it slightly. Are you sure? You look like you were possessed. Matthew furrowed his eyebrows, unsure of what I meant. Did he really not remember? I know, because concerned despite to no answers. Why was he acting so strangely? Matthew took his hands in his. Matthew took my hands in his and held them gently, rubbing his thumbs over the top of my hands.
Hey, is everything alright?
I almost glared. That was what I was asked. Sorry guys, I'm still chewing. I almost glared. That was what I had asked him. I wasn't crazy. I knew that something was off, and I had to try to figure out what. I squeezed Matthew's hands instead. Matthew, I'm serious. You were staring at the fire, and your eyes just looked glazed and stuff. Pressing his lips together, he looked down, trying to discern what I meant, as if he didn't do what I had suggested he did. I pulled his hands, now worried. I didn't want him to assume I was making things up. You believe me, right? Matthew stared into my eyes, reading them as he nodded.
I do. I do. I don't know how to respond. I mean, I don't remember being in a trance.
You were in a trance, boyo. You were in one hell of a freaking trance. As he said that, however, he suddenly curled over and held his head, hissing in pain. Matthew! Quickly, Matthew collapsed onto his knees and gripped his head, digging his fingers into his hair as I followed him down. Now I know for sure something was definitely wrong. I cupped Matthew's face, trying to read his expression, and trying to figure out what was wrong, just from the sight. A moment passed before Matthew let out a gasp of breath, opening his eyes wide and panting for some fresh air to enter his lung. His eyes painted with his fear, as if he had just encountered a nightmare within the moment that passed. Matthew, what happened? Matthew wouldn't speak, furrowing his eyebrows and shaking his head.
I heard someone calling to me.
Calling to you? For a moment I believed it to be his mother. Maybe he was hearing what I heard in the human world. But why didn't I hear it anymore? It made no sense. Matthew shook his head and gritted his teeth.
It sounded like my mother. But how could she...
I took Matthew's hand and held them to my chest, catching his attention. Hey, let's go ask the others about this. If it's not too late to go talk to them. Matthew suddenly shook his head and took his hands from mine, grasping my shoulders.
It's alright, really. I don't need their help. We can figure this out on our own.
Matthew. I had a really bad feeling about the situation. Matthew was getting put in a trance, then getting headaches, and hearing his mother's voice. Why was he so reluctant to get the help of his brothers? We're gonna assist. This was too mysterious to dare us. We needed the help. Matthew, we need to...
Please, just trust me, okay?
Matthew stared deep into my eyes, pleading slightly for me to trust him. I bit my lip, still not completely sure that this was the right choice. As I slowly let out a whine of complaint, Matthew gripped harder on my shoulder. Not enough to hurt me, but enough to emphasize his point.
Please.
Matthew seemed adamant. I swallowed my nerves and nodded slowly, taking in a breath and letting out a sigh. Matthew leaned forward and kissed my forehead, thankful that I was willing to trust him. However, trust wasn't the issue. I trusted Matthew very much. However, what I didn't trust was whatever was trying to influence him and hurt him. I didn't just want to leave. This is in the dark. I didn't want us to hit a wall with this and could potentially hurt Matthew more or make him do something even more odd. I grimaced before standing up, helping Matthew up. Come on, let's head to bed. Matthew nodded, agreeing that right now sleep was something we probably needed. I led Matthew to bed and helping him in, cuddling up to him and laying my head on his shoulder. Matthew?
Yeah?
Are you sure you'll be okay?
I'm sure. I promise. I'll figure this out in no time.
I nodded once more. Before closing my eyes, I had to let him try. If all else fails, I could go get the others for help, but not unless it became dangerous. Still, something felt wrong about this entire situation. First, there was something wrong with me, but now there was something wrong with Matthew. We had the worst luck. I expected the night to take me away into a world of slumber, into a word. Okay, I'm done. I expected the night to take me away into a world of slumber, but was quietly awoken by Simon poking my side with his knife. Yeah, what? I looked down at my side to see Simon waving his arms and pointing at the door, revealing it to be partially open with a familiar red eye peeking through it. I stared suddenly, wide-eyed, but Diana didn't move from her spot, knowing I spotted her. Did she want me to go over there? Simon pulled at my hand, waiting me to go, so I snuck out of Matthew's arm and crept to the door, causing Diana to back away from it and give me the space needed to leave the room. Diana?
Is everything alright?
Huh? Where was this coming from? I furrowed my eyebrows. What do you mean? Diana pressed her lips together and looked into the room for a moment before looking back to me with a serious expression.
I was doing my usual routine around the castle and felt somewhat of a disturbance in the air, like something was trying to make contact with someone here. It was a weak wave.
I stared surprised. Someone was really trying to contact Matthew. I became overjoyed to know that it was simple enough. Diana tilted her head at me, seeing my expression.
What? Did something happen?
Before I opened my mouth to speak, however, Matthew's plea echoed in my head. He wanted me to trust him. If I told Diana, I'd ruin his trust for me. I merely bit my lip, shaking my head. No, I'm just surprised is all. Diana raised an eyebrow at me, but I didn't budge. I didn't want to be the one to say anything until Matthew needed me to. Despite it fighting against every morale code in my body, I had to put some trust in Matthew. Eventually, Diana nodded before turning to leave.
I apologize for disturbing your sleep. Please, have a good night.
With that, Diana left me alone in the hall. I stared mentally flabbergasted at the fact that she simply let it go. However, would she look into it more? I had to admit, I hope so. I returned to Matthew's arm that night, hoping that everything would be okay. The morning was unkind as I woke and yawned. Feeling drowsiness still tried to consume my mind and force it back to sleep. However, I had to train today, and so did Matthew. Speaking of Matthew, I turned my head to see Matthew rubbing his eyes, waking up alongside me. However, his grumble let me know that the night was not kind to him. I nodded and gently leaned down, kissing Matthew's forehead. That seemed to lighten his mood as a happy smile danced across his lips as he let out a happy sigh.
Good morning.
That's the Matthew we love and know. Good morning. I smiled as I hovered over Matthew's face, seeing his beautiful blue eyes gaze into my eyes. Through the blur of sleep, with a sweet, infectious smile, Matthew reached a hand up and cupped my cheek.
You're so pretty. You know that?
He sounds so drunk. Oh my god, what did you drink last night? I felt a blush creeping up on my face. The way he said it so casually made my heart flutter and had me forgotten about the world around us. It was like we were in our own little universe for a short moment of time. I nuzzled his hand and giggled. I didn't want the day to roll on to us getting shady, to separate and train just yet. I wanted to sit back with Matthew and enjoy our time alone. No problems, no danger, just us. Matthew grew a small smirk before snaking his arm, snaking his arm around me and pulling me against his chest, making me gasp and grab onto his shoulders, not wanting to crush him with my weight. However, Matthew smiled and squeezed me close. Now, I know I am mistakenly a lot of words, and that's because I am getting tired, because I've been reading for so long, but I still want to get to the end for you guys. I really hope you appreciate that.
No nightmare last night, huh?
As he said it, I realized it. There was indeed no nightmare for me last night. I had a peaceful, dreamless night. I suddenly smiled and looked down at Matthew with a happy nod. Yeah, no nightmare. I had a good sleep. Matthew chuckled before leaning up and kissing me softly. Just enough for me to feel it. As he pulled away, I became curious about his own night. What about you? Matthew smiled, flattered a bit as I asked, but he shook his head slightly and gained his smile back.
It was rough. I woke up a couple of times. That was pretty much it.
There was more to the story. I had to let it go. If he wanted me to trust him, then I had to with the full extent of my heart. I nodded and planted a light, feathered-like kiss on his nose, making him chuckle beneath his breath. So what's the plan for you?
Well, I figured I could skip some training and just spend some time with you.
Behave, young man, you behave. Town boy, town! With a playful smirk, I grabbed the nearby pillow and gently bounced it on him, making him flail a bit.
Hey!
You know training is important, Matthew. Matthew smirked and rolled us both over to have him on top of me, bouncing his own pillow on me. Gah!
I could totally train with you in a never-ending pillow fight.
Oh, it was on. I quickly grabbed my pillow and swung it at Matthew, landing on a target and causing him to roll off of me with a grin. I arched my body in the opposite direction, hoping to land another hit on him, but Matthew quickly ducked and swung his pillow at me, hitting me with a soft, fluffy impact.
Gotcha.
Pillow fight! The battle became intense as soon as we were double-fisting pillows trying to whack each other with our chosen weapon, while also avoiding the fireplace, the bench, and truly anything that looked expensive around the room. Whoodah! Whoops, there goes the face. Regardless, we were immersed in our own world, ducking in and out with feathers and cloth as we lost track of time. We barely even noticed the door open.
What's going on in...
As Deanna's voice rang through the air, I gasped in surprise and looked over to see the succubus holding 2 plates with snacks of pancakes on them. What frightened me and Diana was a sudden knife chucking itself in Diana's direction, causing her to sidestep and letting the knife rake through a stack, effectively nailing the pancakes to the wall beside her. Whoa!
Hey!
Diana and I looked to Matthew, seeing him panting and posed in mid-throw. His eyes flashed back and forth between gold and blue, glaring hard at Diana, most likely in surprise from her sudden entrance. And once again I was taken away from my fantasy and brought back to reality. Diana snared, practically slammed the 2 plates she was holding on the table, glaring daggers at Matthew.
What in the 7 hells was that about?
Diana! As Diana took a step forward, Matthew suddenly shook his head and realized who was approaching him and who he essentially attacked, causing him to step back and placing his hands in front of him.
Whoa, hold on.
I'm gonna defend him. I quickly reacted, not wanting Diana and Matthew to start fighting. Besides, Diana took us by surprise. Matthew couldn't have known. I rushed over and placed myself between Matthew and Diana, holding my arms out to stop her. Oh, Diana, hold on! Diana stopped and glared down at me, now turning her frustration towards me.
What?
I opened my mouth to speak before Matthew rushed around and pressed his hands together, bowing his head.
I'm sorry. I didn't know it was you. I thought it was an attacker and...
An attacker in my home? They would be dead before they even set foot through the gates!
I looked at Matthew, seeing him grit his teeth, and pressed his hands together hard, trying to gain some form of forgiveness from the succubus who seemed to want his throat cut open. Diana snarled quietly before slapping his hands away and gripping his chin, making him stare up at her.
The next time you dare to attack me will be the last time you feel your heart beating in your chest.
With a threatening scowl, Diana pushed Matthew back and away from her, causing her to turn away and walk towards the exit of the room. However, I rushed to Matthew, catching him before he tripped on his own feet.
Eat, then get to training. Don't waste time.
Diana finally left, leaving me and Matthew lost in our own space once again. This time, we were awake and aware of what was going on. Mildly ashamed of the delusion we placed ourselves in before the sudden surprise from Diana. Matthew rubbed his head, looking to the floor.
Man, I really screwed up.
I knew that he messed up, but he needed to get himself together and fix this mistake, so he could move on and figure out the problem he had already had. I wrapped my arms around him, nuzzling his shoulder. It's all right. I rubbed his shoulders as he rested his forehead against mine.
How the heck do I deserve you?
I merely smiled and kissed his cheek, because you love me and I love you. With a chuckle, Matthew kissed my cheek and nodded. Matthew and I turned to our breakfast and ate what we could, with Matthew taking the plate. He managed to attack the pancakes, almost slipped off the knife that was still embedded in the wall, causing Matthew to run and catch it in his empty plate. He didn't eat it and merely left it there, avoiding it like it had some sort of poison in it. We eventually separated it to train, letting the day roll. I trained once more from the morning to night, desperate to become better at the sword. Marith managed time to step in occasionally to give me pointers, but she became an observer as I practiced on my own, seeing me improve. I didn't look forward to walking back to my room after training. It was easily the hardest part of my day. However, I found it comforting to take my time exploring the castle on my way back. What I didn't expect was to hear surprised shouts echoes through the stone halls. Iridessa. I froze in my tracks, recognizing the voices and deciding to quietly tiptoe towards the door, the room it came from. I peeked in to see the interior of the library, and my gaze zeroed in on Iridessa, who was seated in a chair covering her face with a book with James leaned over the top of the chair, smirking down at her. It was like watching a game of cat and mouse when they teased one another. Iridessa looked up at her husband from behind her book with a giggle, and James watched her like a curious hunter.
I'm sorry. Am I intruding on your reading?
No, you're being a big nerd, and you know it. Peeking over my shoulder and scaring me like that? How rude.
With a small chuckle, James moved from behind the chair and leaned in closer to Iridessa. Laying a soft peck on her cheek, she tried to bite back her smile in no avail, instead hiding it behind her book, amusement clear in her eyes.
I apologize. I won't do it again.
You liar. You definitely will.
Iridessa dropped the book to her lap with a pout before shouting James a mock glare as he continued to simply smile at her as if he had done absolutely nothing wrong. She couldn't keep the expression up, however, letting out an amused huff of breath as a grin tugged at her
I'll
lips.
make it up to you. I'll serve you a plate of crepes in the morning.
Will you feed it to me as well?
If that is what you wish.
Well, I don't need it, but I won't say no.
The dynamic between them always danced between a mature king and queen-like couple, to Iridessa being insanely hard to get, and James giving a playful bait and switch chase. It was amusing to catch a glimpse of their intimacy. Even when we had first met, the relationship between Iridessa and James always seemed to fluctuate on who was truly in charge. Iridessa let out a sigh, sitting up straight in her chair as James walked over to the fireplace and stared into the flames. Her countenance wavered as she watched him, features shifting into something more hesitant, almost nervous, a stark contrast in her earlier mirth.
Hey, James,
Yes, you?
can I ask you something?
James looks over to her, curiosity nodding in the question. Iridessa took in a deep breath and closed the book in her hand, laying it on her lap.
We're gonna go home soon, right?
Of course. As soon as we resolve this war, we'll return home.
Something was wrong. I could feel it just by looking at Iridessa. I knew James did as well. She had something on her mind, but would she say it out loud?
Is something troubling you?
She closed her eyes and took a moment to seemingly gather her nerves before looking to James once again.
It's just... Is it wrong that I kind of don't want us to be here?
What? Where did this come from? James seems to be confused by the question, too, raising an eyebrow at her.
What do you mean?
Iridessa's teeth dug into her lower lip before she placed the book on the table beside her chair and stood up, hugging her arms around herself, her fingers tapping at her arms in anxious tick.
Is it bad that I don't want us to be in the same place as Diana?
I stared wide-eyed at Iridessa. She really didn't want to be here. What was this about? She seemed supported thus far, but what about Diana made her feel uneasy? James turned fully around to Iridessa with a look of mild surprise before his expression lit up with realization.
Is it because she was once my betrothed?
Iridessa seemed to wince at the sentence, but nodded nonetheless in response to James' question. I understood why, though. Who would want to be in the same place as the woman who could have taken the one you love away? James' lips drooped into a frown as he crossed his arms.
I'm sure she has no intentions of taking you away from me.
That's not what I meant. I just...
Iridessa looked down at the ground, pressing her lips together in a fine line.
I guess I'm just not comfortable being here with her. Something about her just... I don't know. I mean, she's a gorgeous cubist and all, and I'm just nothing compared to her.
Wow, I feel very close to Iridessa here.
How could I even compete? You two could have ruled together, made a beautiful couple. She could have given you more than I ever could. She is.
Iridessa.
James' tone forced Iridessa to look up at his face, seeing the stern king his queen had buried.
There is no competition. You are the woman I chose, the one I wanted, the beautiful and kind woman who I was lucky enough to marry. I swore to be with you for the rest of my life as your husband. No one in the 5 worlds can make me betray you or use the love I feel for you.
James slowly walked over to Iridessa, wrapping his arms around his wife's waist. She squeezed her arms around him tightly for a moment before letting out a sigh, the tension leaking from her shoulders as she looked up at him.
You're right. I'm sorry, James. I'm not doubting you, I swear. I guess I've been overthinking it lately. Sometimes it's still hard to believe that you chose me when you could have anyone in the world you desired.
That's true.
You are the only one I desire. I am yours and you are mine forevermore. I'm going to give you my entire life. I will protect you for as long as I live by your side.
Isn't he sweet?
Maestro.
At the mere mention of his demon name, I could see energy pulse around James' form, and he let out a small pleasured hum as he leaned in and pressed his forehead against Iridessa.
You know that you're not supposed to use my name unless you insult.
I could feel a wave of voristic embracement running along my cheeks as Iridessa looked away from him. Biting her lip coyly, James chuckled deeply, however, and kissed her temple, hugging her close to him.
We'll be home soon, I promise. Once this war is over, we'll return and never have to worry about Diana ever again. Okay?
Okay. I love you.
I love you too. Always.
Iridessa finally looked up at James and smiled sweetly. He mirrored her grin, leaning down, but stopped halfway so his love would strain on the edge of her toes to claim her kiss. Her smile shifted into one of the mischief as her fingers curled into the soft material of his sweater. Just over his chest, she tugged, bringing him down so their lips could finally meet. I couldn't help but admire them. They made a pictures. Huh. A picturesque pair, complementing each other in many different ways, be it with fashion, personality, or even with their endearing height difference. Seeing them together, sharing such a sweet moment, reminded me of when I first met her. Iridessa exuded an air of delicate shyness that balanced well with James' commanding presence. I recalled how quiet but polite she had been during our first meeting, full of kind smiles and soft laughter. However, watching Iridessa close the gap between her and the eldest of the brothers made her appear more powerful. She had claimed a would-be king and didn't dare dream of letting him go. I became a little envious of her, but I was happy with the man I had in my life. Their hands started to wander, and I would feel my cheeks heat up. I realized that I had peeked in on them long enough, wanting to give them some privacy. I turned and left them alone to continue my journey to my room. The decor of the hall greeted me as I walked through the corridor, wanting to simply lie down and rest my sore limbs. A muffled giggle, however, caught my attention as I walked past a door that was left open. Out of curiosity, I leaned into the door to find the source of the sound. Inside were Eric and Irene, a pair that emanated charm and sophistication. They were settled at a balcony carved out of the room they were lounging in. From the look of it, it was just an open pocket room, Spartan and probably used for private affairs. Eric and Irene stood by the railing of the balcony, staring out into the sky and smiling at the clear air.
I won't lie. I've missed this world a bit.
That makes only one of us, my love.
Oh, God. You cannot tell me that you don't miss being here.
Irene turned and leaned back against the rail, giving Eric a smug smile. Irene had always been a mystery to me. I was convinced that she was a succubus, but she wouldn't reveal to me what she really was, which added more mystery to her flair. She was definitely pro-demon, always dropping out of glamours whenever she was alone or with any of our group, but she respected humans enough to work her way to the top of the financial heresy the old-fashioned way. So I think Irene is a demon, because that's what that sentence says. She was definitely pro-demon. When Eric told me about her, I could practically feel the love and devotion he had for her with each word he described with her. While I was still his princess, she was his queen in love. Eric chuckled at Irene and shook his head, still facing the sky.
This world is too full of boring or terrible memories. I would rather be back in the human world. Nothing to bother us as we enjoy the world together.
Irene let out a small laugh before sliding closer to Eric, laying her head on his shoulder and staring at the ground.
Eric, there is one thing that bothers me.
Oh, what is it, my love?
Irene pressed her lips together. I could see a moment of hesitation and doubt form in her eyes before she let her feelings out into the air.
Why are you so close to that girl? Your princess. I understand your closeness to your family, but she is your brother's intended.
My heart lurched at the mention. Eric looked at her and took a moment before kissing her head sweetly, wrapping an arm across her stomach and hugging her to him.
Didn't I tell you before? She saved my life and my brother's lives. I owe her more than any human in the human world.
I understand that, but something about the way you speak about her makes it seem like you love her as much as your brother does.
I stared at Irene and Eric in shock. He spoke about me in that way? Why? I was marrying his brother, and he was married to her. That made no sense. At Eric's laugh, I broke from my thoughts, as did Irene, gasping as he pulled her closer, leaning his forehead to her.
Is my queen becoming jealous of a human girl?
What of it?
I find it rather adorable and endearing, despite your concern being completely unjustified. Are you truly concerned about me being close to her?
And if I said yes?
A moment of deep silence passed between them as Eric buried his gaze into Irene's eyes, as she did the same to him. Despite the light tension in the air, I knew that Eric didn't see me the way he saw her. He devoted himself to her long before the moment he said "I do" at their wedding, and despite Eric's having some charmistic tendency, he was never one to betray the trust of someone he cared about. Eric leaned in and captured Irene's lip, making her release sweetly pleasured sighs against him, and lovingly gasped his shoulder as he slowly pulled away. He gave her a genuine smile.
There is no one I love and care for more in this universe than you, my beautiful Leslie. You completely have my heart, my mind, my body, and my soul. And there is no one who can take that away from you.
Irene stared into Eric's eyes, reading him and becoming lost within them at once. Despite her being the one who controlled the relationship, there were often times where she became the one who followed the one she loved. Irene straightened up in Eric's arms, wrapping her arms around his head and nuzzled her nose against his.
My wonderful, beautiful, radiant Leslie. I will be yours now, and in purgatory when we finally rest. If you ever leave my side, I would spend an eternity looking for you.
Okay, so it says, if you ever left my side, and he said in the voice, if you ever leave my side.
If you ever met my son, I would scour the entire human world and demon world for you. I am yours as you are yours, Aries.
The pair smiled lovingly and simply relaxed in each other's embrace. I was rather sweet to see them together. Even as they shared vows in the human world, I could tell their love truly went beyond just their wedding rings. Eric smiled a bit before leaning his head beside her face, whispering a very quiet note into her ear. A rough pink blush ran across her cheeks, causing her to smack his shoulder.
You absolute tease. I swear you say these things just to make me blush. I won't fall for it.
I don't tease. I make promises.
Another smack on the shoulder made Eric tighten his embrace a bit as he laughed while Irene pressed her lips together in a fake attempt to be angry at him. If I knew anything about Irene, it was that she truly loved Eric from the bottom of her heart. I decided to leave them be and continue heading towards my room. I slowly padded back to my room. Tired from the day, I needed rest, and I needed the comfort of my bed and Matthew's arms around me. As I walked in, however, I took in a sight I did not expect to see. Matthew held Simon in a fully body chokehold, crushing his body like a stress ball, and glared hard into his beady red eyes.
I'm gonna rip you apart!
Matthew! I rushed in and grabbed Matthew's hand, prying them apart and letting Simon slip from between them onto the ground. Simon let out a squeak before running out of the room. Matthew, still from some reason enraged, took a step to follow him before I slammed my hand onto his shoulder.
Get back here!
Matthew, stop! I gripped hard on Matthew's shoulder, causing him to turn to me, letting me grab his other shoulder. As I got a good look of his eyes, I gasped at the sight. His eyes were full of rage and anger, and as he panted in place, whenever Simon did really made him go off on the edge or something was influencing him again, I suddenly became afraid, shaking underneath his gaze. Every fiber of my body completely began to spaz out as I began to locked in his angry glare. What was happening to me? I opened my mouth to try and speak, but not a sound would dare come out of my vocal cords. It was like I was too frightened to press him or stop him. As Matthew continued to pant for air and stare at me, something in his mind slowly melted, causing his eyes to slowly widen in realization of what he had done and what he was about to do to Simon. The strange hold on my body faded away as his muscles relaxed, trying to breathe and regain control of whatever had clouded his judgment. As it finally became apparent that he had returned to sanity, Matthew's eyes began to drop in sadness.
What am I doing?
Matthew pulled away from me, placing his hands between us, and stepped back, staring at me in deep regret. I tried to step forward to try and comfort him, but he raised a hand to stop me, walking slowly over to the bed and sitting down, grasping his hand.
Something happened to me. I don't know what.
I frowned as I slowly moved and sat next to him. In shame, Matthew covered his face with his hands and curled up into his knees, digging his fingers into his forehead.
I keep hearing my mother's voice telling me to come home and save her. Whenever I do, I completely lose control of myself. I can't remember what I did or why I did it, but I always manage to do something wrong.
Sorry, guys. Took a bite of chicken again. Thought maybe it would be long enough. Nope. Okay. I grimaced, remembering the random attack on Diana. I placed my hand on his shoulder as he shuddered and shook his head again.
I gotta fix this. There's gotta be some way to stop it from happening to me.
Matthew? It was painful to see him struggling, so I couldn't understand why he had to fight his alone. Why not go to the others for help? Matthew let out a sigh and slumped his shoulders further.
And let them help me, like they've always done?
As Matthew turned to me, I could practically see the shame in his eyes as he spoke.
Every time I was in trouble, they'd always come and help. Every time I do something, I'm treated like a damn kid.
Matthew turned his head away and gritted his teeth, forming fists and laying them on his knees, tightening them in an aggravation.
There's a reason why I didn't ask them to help with the wedding. I don't want them babying me and doing everything like I'm some sort of stupid moron who needs everything done for him. I want to do this on my own. I can figure this out without their help. I'm not even the youngest, but they still treat me like I am, even Damien. I don't want that anymore.
I was speechless. Did Matthew really feel that kind of pressure from his brothers? My mind went back to the first day I had met them. How Eric treated Matthew like a little boy despite Matthew being close to his age. As the grimace of realization appeared on my lips, Matthew let out a shaky sigh.
I can't ask for their help. I'm sorry.
I felt terrible for Matthew. He definitely acted like a kid. But it seemed like only I remember that he wasn't one. After all, I had been with this man for over 2 years of my life. I wrapped my arms around him, hugging me to him, and making him gasp in surprise.
Huh?
I buried my face in his shoulders, slightly apologizing to him, with a soft kiss on his neck. Slowly, Matthew wrapped his arms around me as I was well, taking in a breath and relaxing once more within my arms. A peaceful moment of silence passed between us before Matthew slowly pulled away and looked me in my eyes.
I don't understand why you like me at all, you know?
'Cause you're funny, you're witty, you're a little bit crazy, and you like to make people smile. Why not? Who's not to like ya? What? Confused, I stared into Matthew's eyes, trying to find the origin of where his statement came from. Matthew, however, took my hand and grasped them in his, looking down at them.
I love you so much. I'm not mature like James or the others. I don't understand at all how someone like me could be remotely like that.
Stop. I glared, not wanting him to degrade himself as he looked back up at me. He flinched at my stare, but I needed to get him to see that I loved him and cared for him for every part of him. It didn't matter what he wasn't. It didn't matter that he wasn't like his brother. He was mine, and I loved him. I squeezed his hand and locking his gaze to mine. I love you for you, Matthew. I don't care about your brothers' acts like or how you're not like them. I don't care. I fell in love with you, not them. Matthew remained silent, staring deep into my eyes and taking in everything that I was saying with a broken but hopeful gaze. He really cared about me and didn't want to hurt me. But I didn't want him to hurt either. Whatever thing is trying to control you, we'll fix this. But don't you dare degrade yourself like that. I will so kiss your butt. At last I leaned forward and pressed my lips to his, locking his to mine and loving kiss. Matthew stared wide-eyed before very slowly closing his eyes and melting into the lip block. I wanted to show him how strong and wonderful he was. I fell in love with him, not just for his childish side, but how he made me feel with every part of him. He was very much an adult when I was locked in his arms and I drowned in his kisses constantly. I was so lucky to have him as mine, and I wanted to remind him of that with every part of me, mind, body, and soul. I slowly slid my legs over his lap, straddling his hips, made the kisses between us deeper, relishing in the feeling that were burning between us. Matthew slowly drew his hand up my side and wrapping them around me, hugging me to his chest and almost possessively and making me gasp against his lips. He was getting the idea that I was happy that the message was clear enough to understand. He was mine and I was his. We would support and hold on to each other forever, and nothing would separate us. My clothes were slowly stripped off my body, Matthew taking his time and looking at each inch of my body as it became exposed. I would shyly show him, but happily allow him to indulge and ravish me as he desired if he craved it. A flash of gold passed over his eyes as he finally grasped the back of my neck and kissed me passionately. I couldn't help but moan against his lips, feeling his free hand dancing around each curve of my body as his enthrallment slowly eased itself into my core, warming my soul in love and need. Oh, ain't that a cute pic of him? I couldn't stop myself from grinding against my incubus, needing him to undress himself and let us make love like we both desired. Matthew slightly smirked against my lips before turning us over and staring at me.
You're so beautiful. You know that?
I felt my body warm at his words, making me distracted as Matthew began to run his hands all over my body, leaving no inch of skin unexplored and unconquered by his fingers or lips. I arched my back, pressing my head back to the pillow beneath my head and let out a loving sigh and moan with each pleasureful touch. he placed on me. This was truly heaven. I was so lost that I barely noticed him stripping as well as hovering over me and finally allowing us to become one. As we did, the world around me became lost. I only could see Matthew, and he could only see me. We would become lost in each other's eyes as we wrapped each other in pleasure and love, climbing through our carnal ecstasy and chanting each other's name like two prayers in sweet harmony. My hands gathered themselves around Matthew's body, feeling the slight sweat layered over his soft skin as I dragged my nails over his back. From the pleasureful hiss that erupted from him, I could tell that he enjoyed that and would pay back in kind. Our lovemaking soon became rapid and heated, unrelenting in its crescendo. Towards a beautiful and hot climax, we drove through it together, uncaring of who would hear our cries and screams of love, before slowly easing into a gentle and feather-like afterglow. Matthew and I held onto each other, lost within the embrace between us, and euphoric in our emotions. I was so happy to have him in my arms, causing me to pull him closer to me and cuddle against him. Matthew laughed a bit before hissing me softly and nuzzling my forehead with his. I love you, Matthew.
I love you too.
We remained there, taking in the sound of our synchronized breathing and letting our hearts eventually be as one. We could get through this. We would. Okay, so guys, I'm going to stop the stream right here. I'm going to pick it back up tomorrow in the morning. If you guys do like these streams, please remember to hit the follow button. I also will be posting this on YouTube, and please also remember to hit the like. And if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And please go ahead and check out my other videos. I made a lot of them. And I will see you guys very soon. Talk to you guys later.